Okay, let's preface this, guys. Destiny's going to go really hot on this, and Vaush is not. So we're just going to analyze this, and I will again give this as preface and context that because I criticize one person here does not mean I disagree with them. You know, giving somebody props on something they did well does not mean that I agree with them. This is to look at, like, objectively, as best as I can be objective at where we had issues here. And we're going to be looking at this as, you know, with my experience writing papers and stuff. So that gives me a little bit of background on forming arguments and trying to remain logical, and at least the ability to kind of see the structure and what they're talking about, hopefully communicate that to you guys and give you some insight on what I'm thinking about that. What I'm thinking about this is not up for political debate or discussion, but I'm happy to talk with you on a rhetorical level about it. So if anybody gets upset from my, you know, whatever in this video, we could talk about it. Just like reach out. Oh, wired guitar rating with a party of 7. Thanks, boss. That's crazy. I don't know why my alert box didn't go off, but that's so cool. Thanks. Let's go ahead and go through this. Let's just get it over with. Hold on. I have notes, so we'll look at the notes. And I don't think we can have Vaush on, so we'll just keep him on the side.
That happened back at the turn of the century.
Oh, shit. Let's not have that at 2 times speed. Let's put that at 1.5 for you folks at home. Have fun, bud. I will.
That happened back at the turn of the century, back in the 1900s, 2000s.
Oh, sorry. Oh, fuck. I fell asleep. I'm sorry.
Why are you... Wait.
Okay, this is what we're getting into, guys. This is going to be Destiny being really, really uncharitable. But yeah. Let's... I don't think I could show him on the screen. I'm so confused. I have to be able to show him on the screen, right? I don't know. Whatever. We'll just imagine having an electric guitar that doesn't have an amp built into the body. I can imagine such a thing, sure. But I think it would be hard to hold. It would be shaky and stuff, wouldn't it? Because it'd be making a bunch of noise. Tuesday talk, okay. I'm going to have my notes, and then we'll I'll put something interesting on here for you guys to watch. I don't know. This won't be important. Maybe we should just switch scenes for this. Just because I'm really confused on what we're allowed to do on Twitch and what we're not allowed to do on Twitch. So we'll do this. We'll add... whoops. All right, let's just flip me and then we'll... No, that's lame. Okay, we'll just keep this. I've seen some accounts that have small amps. Acoustics that have small amps. Yeah. Although I feel like the acoustic would need that a lot less. Yeah, I honestly don't know why you can't have just sound coming out of it. That's a good question. It could very well not be the case. All right, we're going to have this really tiny over here.
Up yet?
Wait, is this in slow mo? No.
Vaush is comparing you to a white moderate. Wait, what? Why? Wait, really?
1.5, okay.
I can't start earlier than 28 seconds on this clip? What is this site?
And that's where
Or maybe that's where it's actually starting and this is just like a Chrome.
And that's where the issue is they at the same time.
Yeah, you'll notice Destiny never actually proposes solutions to any of these huge problems because he doesn't have any. His goal here is just be a stopgap, essentially a white moderate. He is essentially doing...
Okay, let's take a quick pause. So what is Destiny listening to? He is listening to a response that Vaush made to Destiny and I talking briefly for that little bit in that video of their past discussion, and they got real heated about it. So we'll kind of talk this out. Let's see, Destiny public private. Okay, Vaush call notes. All right. So this white moderate thing, what are we talking about? What is this white moderate nonsense? Well, let's check it out. So this is a tweet that Vaush made that I think is a start maybe of this white moderate thing or a response to this conversation. I'm not sure. In any case, it gives us a little bit more context into what he means. So he says Martin Luther King Jr. condemned the white moderate not because they were racist, but because they myopically obstructed revolutionary change in an era where revolutionary change was necessary to liberate black Americans. Let's keep in mind the revolutionary thing with Vaush, right? So like I said before, oftentimes there's some core principles or ideas that people have, and they're going to drive a lot of their logical conclusions or logical efforts or rhetorical, whatever. You have a few things that you want to accomplish or that you believe in. They're going to fundamentally affect all the other systems you build on top of them. We all have them. One of his, for argument and stuff, is the revolutionary thing, which we already talked about. So when he says something like this, not because they were racist, but because they myopically obstructed revolutionary change in an era when revolutionary change was necessary to liberate black Americans. We're going to cut out the black Americans. We're going to look at this part. This is the part where this comes in. So they myopically obstructed revolutionary change in an era when revolutionary change was necessary to liberate. So if there are people standing in the way of what you see to be the need for a revolutionary change, or they stand in the way of revolutionary change that you feel is completely necessary to do something that needs to be done, then that's how you justify doing the thing, or that's how you justify the other person being in the wrong. So there's this underlying belief about the revolutionary thing, and that's how he's tying it into here. Is we see parallelism between the characterization Vaush has of the direction the world is going, or arguably where it is presently, and the revolutionary changes that seem to be the solution to those problems. That's Vaush's thing that he's putting forward, is that we have problems in the world right now, and it seems like the only solution that we could have to these are going to be revolutionary changes, and that there are people, in the context of this tweet, there are people standing in the way of what are necessary revolutionary changes that stand to liberate people. And when you're against that, the same way the white moderates stood in front of this, and it wasn't that they were racist, but it's the thing that Vaush wants to focus on, that they obstructed revolutionary change when we needed it. But the argument that nowadays is a time when we need revolutionary change is the question that I think should be discussed more, because that gets more towards the heart of what Vaush wants to discuss. And then, in spite of those white moderates, revolutionary change happened. This is another thing, is Vaush makes this sandwich that makes you believe what he believes. This is like an argumentative, I don't know what we would call it. I definitely use it too. If we give a prescription and stuff, if we start off with some like context around something, and then in the middle of that context, we leave it blank, and then at the end we put the result, we can imply what the thing we should have done was. So again, if we give you context for the problem and we frame it in a certain way, that we leave out the middle, and then we give you the conclusion, our conclusion and our intro can be used to beg the question of what should happen in the middle. Oftentimes, if we frame the intro and the context in a certain way, and we frame our conclusion in a certain way, we could point at what should happen in between, or we can expressly state what happened in between. Why do I mean that here? So let's see. Martin Luther King Jr. condemned the white moderate not because they were racist, but because they myopically obstructed revolutionary change in an era when revolutionary change was necessary to liberate, blah, blah, blah. And then, in spite of those white moderates, revolutionary change happened. Okay? So even though those people stood in obstructing it, and even though it seemed like it wasn't going to happen, the civil rights stuff, they got past it. It wasn't enough, but it was more than the white moderate ever could have done, faster than they ever could have done it. And I guess this is getting at the idea that, like, ultimately we're stronger, or the people that are pushing for these good changes are going to be stronger than these moderates or these obstructionists. And that ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to be the people pushing this change that are going to overcome these people that are standing in the way, and that it is possible. It's almost like a message of hope. But let's get back to the sandwich thing. What did you mean by the sandwich, Noah? Well, because they were myopically obstructed revolutionary change, whatever. So they stood in the way of change when it needed to happen. In spite of that, revolutionary change happened. What was the revolutionary change? What is revolution? All this stuff. We leave that as the blank, but it is the revolutionary change. I mean, we could say that he put it right here, maybe. But the in-between is the worrisome part. The in-between is the actual important part. The in-between is what we don't talk about. Like, because the in-between for this was not a revolutionizing of like the entire economy of the United States of America, albeit it was big. It was literally changes to the right? Didn't we change the Constitution with that? Didn't we pass some amendments? Like, we for sure had the Civil Rights Act. So like we got some crazy stuff passed that nobody ever saw coming. But it's not on the same level as changing the world economy or the economy of the entire country. I don't know. That's like way different than getting policy changes. Like, I feel like you're pointing towards something that was a policy change, labeling it revolutionary change, and then using this implication as a way to push your own ideas. And I think we're using MLK in like a really weird way here. I generally would tell people to avoid this kind of stuff because it can come off as cringy, IMO, to bring up the MLK thing. Like, it's definitely not going to get you people on the right. And it's not because they don't like black people or they don't like MLK. It's because when you use MLK and you quote him and stuff to push your ideas, it comes off as really disingenuous, whether it's a correct use of it or not. So I generally tell people to avoid that. But that's not to say he's incorrect in the way he's using it or anything like that. That's just my advice. I'm going to keep giving those caveats here with Vaush, just in case he sees this or clips it or only watches the little bit of it. I just want to be really careful that he comes away with the right idea behind what I'm doing here. It's not that I'm calling him out and I want to have some big debate about it. I'm just saying these are things you could improve. So perhaps in the future, don't use Martin Luther King Jr. to prove your point. It doesn't look nearly as well as something else that you could choose to do. So that's a tweet to give you some context on this.
The thing that MLK complained about in the Burma.
Why do all of these fucking losers who've never read a single letter, book, or anything relating to civil rights always bring up the right moderate? We've all read the fucking quote, my dude. This has nothing to do with that. Like, and I do have real solutions. How can you unironically say, we can talk, I even specifically said to Vaush, I want to talk policy. Policy is a solution. That's what I want to talk to. All you want to talk to is about all you want to talk about is your fantastic fucking revolution that no one gives a fuck about, that's never going to fucking happen. And even if it did, you wouldn't be ready for it. And even if it didn't, you were ready for it. You would fucking lose. Like, how are you going to sit here and accuse me of being the moderate or being the guy that doesn't want to talk about real solutions when everything about what you talk about is some idealistic fucking dumb fuck utopia that has never existed successfully on the planet Earth, has never been shown to demonstrate, has never demonstrated that it could be even successful anywhere on Earth, and it's like fucking, you don't even have policy positions to get your way there. Like,
Okay, we're just going to keep going.
Yeah, the problem is that I can't even get to the policy discussion because most of these people don't even understand the systems that they're criticizing. I don't think
You have to be careful. You have to be careful. You're accusing Vaush of not understanding these systems, so I don't think you guys have necessarily had like a super at-length discussion on it. You always do this thing where, especially when it's an ideology you disagree with, like socialism, he likes to extend that to other debates that he's had with other people or other arguments he's seen on Twitter or elsewhere from other people who are prominent in the space or supporters in the space. But the issue is appealing to that does not work with that demographic of people, nor does it work with the people in the middle all the time. Who it works best for are the people that are already on your team, because you're tossing rocks at people who you're supposed to be convincing of your perspective. So it's not helpful to do that. Even if you completely disagree with all the socialist stuff, I think if you really believe that it's so unlikely to happen, it shouldn't warrant this giant response from you. And I think you should work on thinking about it that way, that like, if I really don't think this is possible and yada yada, then I really shouldn't emotionally respond. So, I shouldn't have such a big response to it.
talk any policy whatsoever.
Got to go. Thanks for responding to my question before. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like Biden. I'm just like stuttering and flubbering all my words right now. Goldie era.
With Stryker, because he didn't even know how finance worked. He didn't have any of the basic conception of how any of the fucking things he wanted to talk about work. So I didn't even get to talk about policy. That's your fault, not my fault. Like, fuck. Sorry, maybe Vaush did this video a long time ago. And when is this?
And that's where.
What is the date on this? Debate with Eric Stryker. Oh no, this was recent. Fuck, dude, Ian, you're so fucking stupid. I love you, but you're such a fucking moron. Like, how can you unironically say I don't want to
Okay, you can't say he's a moron.
talk about policy when you fucking jerk off some dipshit socialist utopia constantly? That's never.
This thing to the socialist utopia is something to slight at Vaush, but it's not good for an argument just because it flatly rejects the exact ideology that you're supposed to be arguing against in the conversation. But because Destiny is not interested in arguing against it, he's just going to reduce it to that and hand wave it. I just don't know if that's effective at convincing socialists away from their positions. When you hand wave the very ideologies that often are the things that a lot of these different beliefs are built on. So like, if we dismiss Marx, if we dismiss general socialist or communist principle, or whatever, if we're like broadly dismiss all of socialism or whatever, we broadly dismiss a lot of other political ideologies that take something from that. So like democratic socialists, or the socialist parties of other countries, or other liberal parties even. Like, I don't know. The political ideologies are important. I don't think they're as important as Vaush makes them out to be, nor as instrumental as he'll put forward a case for near the end of this. But my disagreement with that aside, Destiny's way of handling this is not the best. So I wouldn't advise against doing something like this. But he's with his audience, so he's speaking to his audience, and that's what he's doing.
Never gonna fucking happen. We both know that, right? You and I know that in our lifetime, there will never be a socialist utopia in the United States. It's never gonna happen. Like, you talk about it literally as a hobby. Like, you might as well be debating like the most optimal form of government that could exist in the Star Trek universe. Like how could you say that?
Okay, again, this is the hyperbole thing. He's upset. I've already said that this happens. It's something he has to work on. Again, I'll bring it up to him the next time I talk to him. I'll be like, hey, that Vaush call, what the fuck, eh? You know, but like, I get that he's frustrated. I get where the frustration comes, and I would assume that once we talk about it, that's immediately to where he'll jump to. Is like, yeah, but what do you say when people do this? Or I just find it frustrating when somebody does X, Y, and Z. And it's like, yeah, but that doesn't, you're not talking about the substance, like my recommendation of change for you, though. Like, yeah, it's frustrating, but we're not debating whether or not it's frustrating. We're talking about your reaction to frustration and the way that you take that out either on your audience or on other people, and the way it creeps into your speech and makes it to where you have clippable moments that are awful for you. Yeah.
I don't want to talk about
He's off league this week, so he should be a lot less frustrated. Let's hope.
policy. Like, it's so fucking stupid. Holy shit.
Yikes.
Socialists never bring policies to the table, and when they do, they're usually incredibly milquetoast or totally devoid. And you agree with me on most.
And see, he's broadly, don't do this broad thing. It's not good, but he's talking to his audience, so we'll see if he improves that when he talks to Vaush.
On most of my major policy points, I don't think you're a fan of rent control anymore if you've talked about it, or maybe you've done research on your own. You realize how brain dead the policy is, right? We both agree that maybe preferential loans can be given to co-ops, sure. Like, okay.
I've been awake all day. I've been up since 9 a.m.
Okay, new rule. You can hold me accountable to this. Anytime I talk to any more lefties about anything, I only want to talk about policies. We're never going to talk about any.
So this is one place where I think other people might normally disagree, like based on the prescriptions I gave up to this point. But here's somewhere where I would agree with him. If you don't want to talk about political ideology, or you don't want to talk about political philosophy or whatever, yeah, take them off the menu. Just tell somebody you're not interested in talking about that. In much the same way that if I was uneducated in something and I didn't want to talk about it, like I don't want to debate like political issues with people. Like if they want to talk about policies or something, like maybe I could, but I don't want to like debate with somebody about all that stuff. I don't feel like I have the info needed to be so confident that I'm trying to dissuade somebody else out of their opinion about it so strongly and persuade them to my side on it. But I mean, if somebody has a bad take or something, I'll explain my point and like pick apart theirs and try to see if like maybe they're more correct. But my intentions in that are very different than I feel it is when you're in a debate. When you're in a debate, you've already accepted that you disagree with the other person, and it's about convincing them. Like the N-word thing is probably going to be a debate because I'm convinced that I'm correct on it. I'm convinced that Destiny's not, or that Destiny making this change to a system could benefit him. So that's why I'm approaching him to change his mind on it. Destiny will hand wave people critical of his hyperbole. I probably mean dismiss, not hand wave. I mean, he was very, yeah. So he fought the one lady that talked to him about poor people on it. And then I talked to him after that lady talked to him. So when he talked to that lady, he said, I'm not removing hyperbole from my language and yada, yada. Or not removing all hyperbole from my language, yada, yada. When I talked to him, I was like, are you going to be open to actually accepting some idea of removing hyperbole from your language or like whatever? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, because you talked to that lady and you told her you never want to remove it. So if you don't want to change that, I don't want to talk about it. But he does understand that it impacts his stuff. I think it's just about making sure, like, he can use hyperbole. That's fine. Just don't let it take away from what you're trying to communicate, right? Like, don't overplay the badness of another person's position. That's going to take away from your argument. Don't use an example that's not analogous, obviously, to the conversation we're having. Like, don't start having, like, I have a really bad hypothetical that I give that was hyperbolic, and I think it was clipped. I was high, so I mean, it wasn't, obviously I'm not going to be the best rhetorical strategist or whatever, but it was between me and a friend, and I used a analogy that was like totally not related to the conversation, and it confused him. But yeah, so the problem is when your hyperbole dips into analogies or your language in general and takes away from the point you're trying to communicate. Like if I'm communicating with somebody that disagrees with me and they keep wanting to argue about the hyperbolic language that I use, like they're like, well, it wasn't, 500 million. It was actually like 6.2 million. And you're like, yeah. I just threw out a number. I think my main point is that blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, no, because you said something incorrect. So now I have to fix the incorrect thing. Just stick to what you believe, which is something that Destiny tells other people to do. Is that don't come at me with an argument that you don't truly believe in just because you think it's correct. Bring me an argument that you truly believe in, then we'll discuss it. Anywho, let's continue.
As soon as they start going off on some dumb fuck, no production change, get rid of the product, any dumb shit like that, I'm just going to stop them and say, hey, I don't want to talk about fantastic delusional bullshit right now. Let's talk about policies. Hold me to that. Anytime I have a conversation with a different on.
Work problem is I don't want to see.
Hold on, Vaush is saying I'm misrepresenting him.
And that's where the issue is they at the same time.
Yeah, you'll notice Destiny never actually proposes solutions to any of these huge problems because he doesn't have any. His goal here is just be a stopgap, essentially a white moderate.
So also this white moderate comment comes on a comment that I don't think has like a lot of weight outside of Vaush's community right now. Let's re-listen to that and see. So we have a really compelling appeal to the authority and the historical figure that is MLK and like what he represents for people on the left and just in general. But let's see what he attaches to that.
Because he doesn't have any. His goal here is just be a stopgap, essentially a white moderate. Solutions to any of these.
And that's where the issue is they at the same time.
Yeah, you'll notice Destiny never actually proposes solutions to any of these huge problems because he doesn't have any.
He doesn't propose any solutions to these problems, any actual solutions to these problems because he doesn't have any. That's a hyperbolic statement that is also not true, right? Like we can agree that even if we're Vaush fans, that's not true. Destiny definitely has policy points. The crux of a lot of his arguments are around policies. So I just think it's disingenuous to say that he doesn't have policy solutions. And then on top of that, to emphasize that by making this comparison to white moderates, because it works if we characterize him as somebody who doesn't push forward any real solutions and just like sees problems and ignores them the way the white moderates did in response to the civil rights issues. That I think that's disingenuous. I don't think that's not fair to say, because he definitely has policy points. Like a lot of his stuff he discusses policy points, and the white moderate thing only really works if Destiny is doing that. And as we've talked about before, there's probably other better comparisons Vaush could use aside from the white moderate thing. But I think the white moderate thing probably works with lefty people a little bit more because it's got the MLK punch to it. But anywho.
His goal here is just be a...
Hold on. I think I also have like highlighted notes on this or something. Oh, yeah, let's just look at this written down. It can make it a lot easier. Yeah, we'll look at it written down. Hold on.
Stopgap, essentially a white moderate. He is essentially doing the thing that MLK complained about in the Birmingham letter. People who oppose... It's not because he's white, by the way, because this isn't a racialized conversation. But it's fundamentally, he doesn't have like a solution or a timetable for change, but he's very, very interested in putting shackles on the people who are more concerned about change than he is, He's a fairly wealthy... I'm pretty sure his net assets are well over $1 million. It doesn't really matter too much. He's a wealthy person who has a great deal of material and social capital, who looks at the class issues of those who push for them and says, well, okay, sure, maybe, I'd be in favor of worker co-ops or Medicare for all if it was electable and if people supported it, but they don't. So,
Let's look at that passage for 2 seconds. So I have it written out because it's going to make it easier for us to actually keep in track everything that he says. Because this is something, even me, when I listen to Vaush, it's really difficult for me to keep track the difference between what he's saying and what he actually says. So yeah, you'll notice Destiny never actually proposes solutions to any of these huge problems because he doesn't have any. His goal here is just to be a stopgap, essentially a white moderate. He is essentially doing the thing that MLK complained about in the Birmingham letter. People who oppose, it's not because he's white, by the way, because this isn't a radicalized. So let's start with here. So Destiny never actually proposes solutions to any problems because he doesn't have any. We've already established that this is probably not true, and at best it's not charitable, so we're going to put that in red. His goal here is just to be a stopgap. A stopgap. Okay. This is kind of not super fair because we haven't made the point yet. Essentially a white moderate. And then this is the MLK comparison thing, which we're going to mark as red because I've already discussed it and advised against it. He's essentially doing the thing that MLK complained about in the Birmingham letter. People who oppose. Okay, so then we're just going to keep this as red. And he has to stop himself and make the distinction about the racialized nature of the comment, because this white moderate thing sounds a lot worse coming off your lips than it does on the keyboard, I'd assume. That's why. But maybe it's just he wants to give the extra context. I don't know. People who oppose, it's not because he's white, by the way, because this isn't a racialized conversation. Yeah, having to give this caveat kind of helps to emphasize why this comparison and quote probably isn't the best. And you could use this on a ton of other people, though. I bet you could, and it would make a lot more sense. The only issue is using it on Destiny. I don't think that's fair. I don't think, in much the same way that the light that Destiny paints Vaush in, as far as comparing him to other socialist people and influencers, I don't think that's super fair. Vaush is in a category all of his own. Like, Vaush is really good at rhetoric. Vaush is really good at talking to people. And I think everybody kind of deserves their own distinction for how they are viewing stuff and what they believe, especially if you're going to have political conversations with them. I think you want to be careful about that. But because Destiny argues with people all the time, he just like starts stereotyping him and people in that way. I don't think that's good. Like, especially for Vaush. I think Vaush deserves to be treated differently and to get more respect. But that's my take. Okay, we'll keep going. He doesn't have like a solution. So this is a separate thing. This is separate to this. This stopgap point is almost different than the white moderate thing. Like, we can look up the definition of stopgap so I could just make sure I'm giving this a temporary way of dealing with a problem or satisfying a need. Okay. But the white moderates weren't doing anything. They weren't giving stopgap. So this is not a good comparison, okay? But we'll move past that. He doesn't have like a solution or a timetable for change, but he's very, very interested in putting shackles on the people that are more interested about change than he is, you know? This is the revolutionary point. Let's go ahead and make this purple. So anytime he's doing these revolutionary nods, we're just going to put it in purple, and we're going to talk about why it's important that we make sure that we keep in mind that part of Vaush when we're looking at his language, because he's pushing for other things that are not on the surface super duper clear. Like when he says he doesn't have like a solution or a timetable for change, but he's very, very interested in putting shackles on the people that are more interested about change. We're very vague about what change means, right? What is change here? Let's try to find other places where we talk about change. Does he mention change again? I'm just going to check. Maybe people who oppose change was there, but maybe not anymore. Anywho, so why do we think the revolutionary spin is important to keep in mind when we're trying to figure out what he's saying in this line? I think it's important because he's pushing for this accelerationist idea, right? That somebody has mentioned in chat. I think accelerationist is probably like a good way of wording it. There's this idea that it's the normal people, or the moderate people or whatever in the country are kind of limiting the time that it'll take to implement the change that other people want. And he extends beyond this in his other discussions, but there are problems that exist that he doesn't feel like we're going to be able to implement change for in a reasonable time scale that's actually going to solve the problem in time. And so this timetable thing and putting shackles on the people who are more interested in change is all like low-key code for this like socialist change stuff. And it's all kind of referencing back to this idea that like there are restrictions on socialist people getting their policy changes into place, and that's what's justifying the revolutionary thing. But if we start to paint this picture that Destiny is just one of these people who's putting shackles on us and who doesn't seem to have a timetable but wants to limit how quickly we can adopt change, I think that's a far stretch from the actual argument that he has, which is against revolutionary thinking, and this idea that if we can't get our policy changes put into place through the legitimate systems, that therefore means that we need to revolt. Because there are a lot of positions, like the Nazis' positions, where it's like, I'm happy that they're not able to get that passed. I think having the bar there to have to convince other people of your ideology is an important one. And if you can't at least get public support, like vocal support from citizens for your policy, then I think it's really tough to go for revolution. Like, I think if you're at the point where your whole population is asking for a change and it's not fucking happening because the government is pushing against it, but we have like over 50% of people, maybe as much as like 70, that are like, I'm not going to put a number on it, but if a bunch of people are in agreement on this thing and the only reason it's not being put into place is because the government is actively stopping what the majority wants, I don't know, then we're in a position where we can start to talk in these terms. But I don't think we're there yet. And I think painting it in this light is something he does a lot. He's also not super good here. This is going to be a thing that upsets Destiny a lot. He's a very wealthy, we're going to make that in red, a fairly wealthy, I'm pretty sure his assets are well over $1 million. It doesn't matter too much. So referencing back to another talk that we looked at from, what was their name? I think it was Vivian Wolf. So looking back to the talk that Destiny had with Vivian Wolf, that little scene that I did an analysis for, remember how they put in a bunch of stuff from a previous conversation at the end? They put but that's neither here nor there to push it aside. They got their whole purpose there to get the audience, or if we'd like to think of this as like a court trial, to get the jury to hear a bunch of bad shit about the defendant or the accused or whatever. I don't know. In this case, the metaphor kind of breaks down, but we can start to paint a picture about somebody, give this little caveat at the end so we could get out of it, but we still had all the effect of the negative thing. I'm pretty sure his assets are well over $1 million. Mentioning this is not good, and then putting this thing after doesn't really undo that, especially since he then jumps into this. It really doesn't matter too much could be in reference to the exact number. It doesn't really matter that much. He's just fairly wealthy, and that's as much as far as we need to go with it. I think that's most likely the intention of it, but the way it's accepted in other people's brains will be different. He's a wealthy person that has a great deal of material and social capital. So this is the ideology part talking. He's a wealthy person. If we want to say this is purple too, we could. I'm just going to keep it at red because it's ultimately, these are just attacks on the personhood of Destiny and not necessarily anything levied at his arguments and stuff. I mean, technically all of this is the characterization of him as a white moderate. He has stopgap. He's just simply in the way of change, doesn't have a timetable, has no solutions that he's proposing, no policy that he's pushing for, and he's a wealthy person with a great deal of material and social capital who looks at the class issues and those that push them and says, well, okay, sure, maybe. I'd be in favor of worker co-ops or Medicare for all if it was electable and people supported it, but they don't. So, this whole thing, I get why this upset Destiny. I think we can kind of get that too. I probably, not anymore, LOL. Yeah. So who looks at the class issues and those that push them? This is also going to be in purple because this is, again, our socialist stuff talking. Well, okay, sure, maybe I'd be in favor of worker co-ops or Medicare for all if it was electable. I don't even think that's the caveat that he gives. I think he picks these things because they are electable, but saying I would be in support of these if they are electable is different than saying I believe in these because they are electable. And I don't even know if it's the electability thing. It's the crux of his argument. The reason why Vaush wants to frame things in terms of this electability thing is because generally, this is my guess, people on the left, this time around with the politics, they focused on this like electability argument and how it's not like super helpful of a term because it doesn't really describe stuff. And then there's another subsect of people that are saying that the media or the establishment, whatever, uses this electability argument as a way of like controlling moderate voters or people that vote only based on what they see on the media and TV. And that this electability thing could just be BS. Like they could just pick the candidate that they want, say that they're electable, push that on the news, people will believe it, and then they vote for that candidate. That's some people's belief. I'm not saying that's Vaush's belief, but this is partially what he's signaling to when he uses phrases like this, whether he's conscious of it or not. And I don't doubt he's conscious of it. Well, okay, sure, maybe. I'd be in favor of worker co-ops or Medicare for All if it was electable and people support it, but they don't, so you know. But this part isn't true either, right? Because Destiny does think co-ops were good, so it's not fair to put the co-ops in with Medicare for All. And co-ops is not an electability issue. Co-ops, people have to just choose to make co-ops. And as far as the cutting checks and giving loans with favorable whatevers to co-ops, Destiny said that he's in support of that, and that's something he made clear in their discussion. So to include co-ops with Medicare for All in terms of things that Destiny has an issue with is disingenuous as well. Those two things shouldn't be together because he has different takes on both of them. Because I'm pretty sure he disagrees with Medicare for All because it's too extreme and whatever, that it's going to be the biggest thing ever, and you know, he has his own arguments for that. But it shouldn't be lopped in with the co-op thing because he agreed with you on funding of co-ops, and the actually formation of co-ops has nothing to do with people supporting it or voting it in, but they don't. So you know, that's not good. Yep. Oh yeah, a little bit. Thank you. Ah, sí. Thank you. You too. Okay. So going through this little portion, I hope that color coding it and kind of dissecting the way that I'm looking at it when I listen to Vaush or when I hear a quote from him, I think will help you guys to understand where I'm coming from in the rest of this discussion. As you guys can probably understand, it takes a really, really long time to go through and color code and put these notes because sometimes I'll put, oh, I should just show you guys. That's always fun. So let's look at a previous talk that I had with Destiny. It's helpful to just show you guys what's involved in a rhetorical analysis so that you can understand why I don't do these for a lot of people. These take a lot of time. If you guys want one done, get a few people together or get a streamer to reach out to me. Oh, cool. Oh, shoot. That should be on top of everything. I don't know why it's not. Small Forest found us mildly amusing. Thanks for the follow, bro. Small Forest. Hope you stick around. Hope it's helpful. So in this general, let's look through here. So the way that I normally structure a rhetorical analysis is that I'll go through. Generally, my color coding works as yellow is going to be our main topic. Blue is going to be supporting evidence or logic. Purple is going to be specific terms that I see repeated or evidence for an argument that I want to make later. Orange is going to be in support of the yellow. And then red is usually bad rhetoric. Green is usually supportive rhetoric. And then I use some other colors to distinguish. Each quote, and again, this is almost an entire discussion, line by line, from each person. And so when I have a point that I want to make on something, I put a toggle there and I give my feedback on it, which again is color-coded and well-made. And these are going to be on almost every single one of these. And so it takes a long time for me to prepare something like this. So when somebody hand waves something that I say about this or comes at this as if this is a political topic and I want to discuss the politics of it, I think they misunderstand where I'm coming from. That's right. I really wish that Vaush would just take a second to like consider that maybe I'm not like everybody else, that I'm not like coming at this from a political standpoint, because I hate that he thinks that I am. And just realize that I'm only interested in the argument and like the academic part of this. That's why this channel is Booksmarts. I'm not super about all this politics discussion. I'm not sure if it's something I want to do personally, but I really like discussing the arguments. It's super cool. It's helpful. Colors are nice compared to other Medicare for All proposals or systems around the world. Let me see. Hold on. Destiny doesn't think Medicare for all is electable, but still supports it. So Vaush is doubly wrong there. Oh, okay. I have no idea. I'm not going to presume to know Destiny's point on that. But I last I heard, I'm pretty sure he is against it. And I think he's against it because he doesn't believe that it'll pass through the Senate. But I may be wrong on that. But Amanda, I feel like you have misunderstood some other things that you've linked to me. So I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I don't think he supports Medicare for all because I don't think he thinks it'll pass through the Senate, at least in its current form. So I don't think that's the case. Let's look at this again. So yeah, that's why I'm not going to do this for all of what Vaush says, but I hope that just doing this section gives you guys an understanding of what I'm listening for. Let's go ahead and, the rest of the notes are only for Destiny. So we'll just kind of go through that whenever we get to it. Let's go through the rest of the talk.
Okay, go to Vaush's thing. I'm talking to him for a second.
Uh-oh.
I need to calm myself down.
Oh, thanks for the bits.
My Prime sub
We
went
didn't talk
missing to
policy
no
a
one
single
this
time.
month, but please have these bits.
Aw, thanks. They'll be put to good use.
Wait,
In
are
our
you gonna
conversation,
wait? I
you
don't want to be
realize that, right?
responsible for you getting
I'm
banned.
not banned. I'm muted. We didn't talk policy a single time. We didn't go any over the different types of universal healthcare proposals. We didn't address anything related to the Green New Deal.
Wait, but
We
I'm
didn't talk
happy.
anything related to
I'm
yeah,
happy
sure.
to talk about those things. If you had brought the
Well, wait,
conversation
wait.
in that direction, then I would have been happy to.
No, I didn't bring the conversation in that direction because you wanted to talk theoretical socialist utopia.
No.
You didn't
Whoa.
talk policy a single time.
Wait.
Actually, let's do this step by step, guys. That'll be fun. Let's do this one step by step.
I need to calm
I'm feeling lively after those bits. Okay. Step by step, guys.
myself down.
He has to calm himself down, okay? Because he fucking freaks out and then he gets crazy. At least he's trying to fix it in some kind of way.
We didn't talk policy a single time.
Wait,
in
are
our
you gonna
conversation,
wait? I don't want to be
realize that, right?
responsible for you.
We didn't talk policy a single time.
Wait,
in
are
our
you gonna
conversation,
wait? I don't want to be
realize that, right?
responsible for you getting
I'm not
banned.
banned. I'm muted. We didn't talk policy a single time. We didn't
Okay.
go any over the different types of universal healthcare proposals. We didn't address anything related to the Green New Deal.
Wait, but
We
I'm
didn't talk
happy.
anything related to
I'm
yeah,
happy
sure.
to talk about those things. If you had brought the
Well, wait,
conversation in that direction.
Saying he didn't bring the conversation in that direction, very different than not having those proposals. We'll kind of go into that in a second. Or not having policy suggestions. We'll go into that in a second. The distinction there is important. That's why I made sure that we went through what he said before we kind of go into this talk, because what he said is important to keep in mind. Fuck, where's my goddamn notes? Here they are. I at least want this up. Okay. Where did he say that? You'll notice Destiny never actually proposed solutions to any of the... Okay, so we'll have to keep that one in mind.
And then I would have been happy.
No, I didn't bring the conversation in that direction because you wanted to talk theoretical socialist utopia.
No.
Oh, that's where he fucks up. That's where Destiny fucks up. He fucked up right there because we cannot reduce the entire argument with Vaush down to this part unless we want to have a discussion about it. If we want to have a discussion about it, this is not the way to open it up. Though granted, he's frustrated, whatever. If this is his on-brand thing and he wants to be crazy, whatever. But he's hyperbolic this whole conversation. So I think we're going to focus on Vaush because Destiny fucked up this whole thing and I don't think he's intending to be convincing to anybody. We'll touch on a few things where he could be more convincing to Vaush in particular, and we'll talk about this in terms of him conversing with Vaush because he's not trying to convince the audience of Vaush or the people in the middle. He's only going for Vaush, so that's Destiny's audience. Let's keep that in mind. And Destiny doesn't care to upset Vaush, so he's going to be hyperbolic. Who is Vaush's audience? His people and Destiny. I don't think he cares about convincing Destiny's audience quite yet because it's not like that, but he definitely cares about his audience because he's on the defense and he cares about Destiny. I guess you could say Destiny cares about his audience, but I think he's kind of just upset, and that's most of what's driving him here, not like impressing his audience or anything.
Wait, please. I literally
Although if it would be more fair to say that there is some % chance he's doing it for the audience, yeah, he could be. It could be all an entertainment thing. I have no idea.
really never did that. I have never
Why did we
on
talk about
stream.
it?
I've never on stream. This is why I feel as though your ability to talk about this is compromised. I was in
Wait,
person with
can
you.
you
I
give me an
never
example?
talked about it.
I agree that his ability to talk about this is compromised, although I think if he had somebody that understood his problem with it, they could work him through it, but I don't think anybody has the obligation to do that. He should really work on having that problem.
Theoretical socialist
Listen,
utopia.
I talk about policy all the time. Why would you say I have no proposed solutions to anything?
I said
What are
specifically
your
to the big issues we were talking about prior to this
No, you did not.
clip
Big
that you saw. Global warming.
Oh, prior to the issues we just saw. Okay. So what are his two issues he's talking about? Let's note that. I think I already have them. Yeah, global warming and manufacturing consent are his main. We could just go through the notes I meant to give to Destiny. Maybe that's fun for you guys. You have to calm yourself down before and take a second for it, which was good, but you also have to catch yourself in the middle of it too. You start by saying that you didn't bring the convo in a policy direction because he'd want to talk about the socialist utopia, which was a bad faith start because we have not laid that out or proven it yet, and he's very unlikely to just let that pass. He says never on stream, and that he never talked about that in the convo, which may be right. Global warming and manufacturing consent are Vaush's main issues that he feels you have no adequate solutions for. I've kept note of the solutions you provided for each to put you at ease that you addressed it. I never finished that, but we'll go through it in the video.
Warming was the main one. Also, the manufacturing consent issue. I don't think those are things you can.
So the manufacturing consent issue is debatable. Okay, I don't remember you proposing a solution to that. And then also, you're telling me because I don't have.
Okay, so far, no solution to manufacturing consent is Destiny's argument. Let's listen to the hyperbolic take he's about to give, though now his hands are on his head and he's freaking out.
Solutions to climate change? Then I don't want to talk about what you could do. What is your proposed solution to climate change, Vaush?
Well, I've talked about it with you. I think that implementing worker co-ops would be a huge.
You have zero evidence that any of that would work any way.
You can't jump in and say, okay, whatever.
Wait, wait, why are you shouting over me?
I'm not okay. I'm giving you contrary evidence that unions stand in the way of a lot of environmentally friendly things.
I acknowledge that.
And I've demonstrated that just by having a co-op, even on a logical deductive level, doesn't mean that you would be opposed to things that might hurt the environment.
Yes,
it doesn't make sense.
However, large, broad-spanning policies that overall serve to the disinterest of the working class to the benefit of the.
Oh shit! Here we go. So, this is one point where I want to pause. Let's go ahead and listen to this, and then we'll go into this. I'll pause it. We'll listen to what Vaush says and see what he actually means.
I think that implementing worker co-ops would be a huge.
You have zero evidence that any of that would work.
So again, we're talking about what were the solutions given for global warming. He says Destiny didn't have any. Destiny gave some for manufacturing, shot down the thing for manufacturing consent, and then he says, what solutions do you even have for global warming in Vaush's co-ops?
In any way, shape,
wait.
He says you didn't give any evidence for that.
Hold on, wait. Why are you shouting over me?
I'm not okay. I'm giving you contrary evidence that unions stand in the way of a lot of environmentally friendly things.
I acknowledge that.
Okay, so the unions are not going to be pro-environment because they stand in the way of a lot of things that are going to be pro-environment. So the unions are not going to be a solution to that. Granted, Vaush didn't mention the unions.
Okay, and I've demonstrated that just by having a co-op, even on a logical deductive level, doesn't mean that you would be opposed to things that might hurt the environment.
Yep, so this was a conversation that they had where basically, even if we give workers the rights to own their entire company, and I'm just going to pick a silly, simple way of explaining it to you guys in case you've never been exposed to these ideas. Like, let's assume that everybody got a vote in what their company did, and everybody worked together to figure out decisions for their company. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody that works at the company. So not just bosses and stuff, but like everybody works together in a democratic fashion to vote on the ways that the company operates. Now, suggesting co-ops or this system of business is not going to solve global warming, because we could very easily have a co-op of, for instance, oil rig workers that are in favor of doing oil rig stuff that's going to be against the environment. Just because all of a sudden all the workers own the company most certainly does not mean that the company is all of a sudden going to start implementing policy change or is going to start acting environmentally friendly. These two things don't follow. They might, because it's more likely that the individuals that are living in like lower classes are going to be affected by the global climate stuff. And so they might be more likely to vote in things that are in their interest. At the very least, they'd have a say in that. I think it's way stronger to say that by having co-ops, workers could intervene in government or they could change things within their company that we can't do through government regulation because the government system is blocked, right? Because Vaush's idea is that the government doesn't work very well, and because it doesn't work very well, or there's systems in place to prevent them from doing the change that they think they need to solve these problems, that we can't solve them at all. That we have to do some revolutionary thing. So my advice to him, if we believe that the system is set up in such a way where we can't do this, and we're proposing like co-ops as a way to fix it, my argument to Destiny would be that, well, the co-ops would be more likely than the corporate whatever, because the people most likely to be unable to avoid the effects of climate change are going to be the workers generally. But even that's a shaky argument, because again, this doesn't logically deduce to being good for the environment. It's just like a maybe. And we have to hope that all the people at all these companies just like have a collective awareness of what they should be doing for climate change. And I think the argument could be made, I'm not going to make it, but whatever. It's not important. It's more important to just note that about the argument.
environment.
Yes,
That doesn't make
but
sense.
however, large, broad-spanning policies that overall serve to the disinterest of the working class to the benefit.
I think I quoted this, didn't I? Yeah, here it is. Okay. We're gonna listen to it.
Benefit of the ruling class would be broken apart by a dissolution of.
Deductive level doesn't mean that you would be opposed to things that might hurt the environment.
Yes,
That doesn't make
but
sense.
however, large, broad-spanning policies that overall serve to the disinterest of the working class to the benefit of the ruling class would be broken apart by a dissolution of the class divide between bourgeois
You're not
and
talking
proletariat.
about policy anymore. You're
Wait,
talking about theoretical utopia.
Wait. Nothing I just
So-
said is
This is what he labels as theoretical utopia.
utopia. I'm not a utopian by any
Breaking
sense.
apart
For
the
two-
class policies to unite the working
We-
class, the
wait,
proletariat. with the
wait,
bourgeoisie. What do you mean?
This is not utopian. This is just political theory. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so anything that's going to have a lot of socialist language in it, Destiny is going to label as pertaining to this socialist ideal, which he labels as a utopian thing to make fun of it. I think the utopian label is a lot like when people put the Chinese flu thing on to be racist about the Chinese flu thing. It's just something we're throwing on top of our claim to kind of upset the other person and deflate their position. So that's what Destiny is doing with that. Now, if you want to do that and be a dick, whatever, I generally would advise against it. So he says, I've given you, this is Destiny, I've given you contrary advice that unions stand in the way of environmentally friendly things. And I've demonstrated that just by having a co-op, even on a logical or deductive level, doesn't mean that you would be opposed to things that might hurt the environment. That doesn't make sense. Yes, but however, large, broad-spanning policies that overall serve the... Large, broad-spanning policies. This is not related to the co-op policy that we're talking about. And it doesn't disprove what Destiny is saying, which is that your co-op idea, like offering co-op and saying co-ops as a solution to global warming, that doesn't work. That's what we're talking about, is how that doesn't work. That is not a solution. Large, broad-spanning policies, we don't know what that is. It's not the co-op thing, because we already said that the co-op thing does not do what we're saying it's going to do. So large, broad-spanning policies is vague, and it points at something that feels like it's not the topic of the conversation here. And then, so we'll go ahead and label that as yellow, because that's kind of our main idea, but not. Overall served the disinterest of the working class, the benefit of the ruling class would be broken apart by a dissolution. Oh, okay. So he's suggesting that these broad spanning policies are things that currently exist. Wow, that's really hard to understand. Hold on. So he's saying the large, broad spanning policies are the current things that are in place, to be clear. So he is taking a whole different direction with this co-op thing. So he's saying large, broad-spanning policies that are currently in place that overall served the disinterest of the working class. That's a part of the yellow, but it's purple. The benefit of the ruling class. This is another problem, is Destiny doesn't like framing things in terms of class all the time or being class reductionist. And I don't think class reductionist is something we can apply to Vaush. I don't like all these labels and shit because they don't really work at all. I'm going to be honest with that. But I'm going to point to what feels like class reductionism, and that's what this feels like. It feels like we're reducing this to class. That feels like the application of the word should be correct here. Because that's what we're doing. We're anytime we're framing things in terms of these socialist terms, that's what Destiny has a problem with. Because once we frame it in terms of the socialist stuff, we have to find a solution in terms of the socialist stuff, and that's always going to point us in the same direction. So that's why he doesn't want to talk about things in the way that Vaush wants to frame them. And that should give you a little bit of maybe background on why Destiny is so crazy about this. He just really doesn't want to engage with this way of framing things. And anytime he sees that, he's going to label it as this theoretical utopia thing. Would be broken apart. This is our revolution, right? Would be broken apart by a dissolution of the class divide between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Okay, that's a lot of purple. You're not talking about policy anymore. You're talking about theoretical utopia. If we replace theoretical utopia with political, with political theory, then all this would be the same thing. Like, when he says these awful things, it's like Trump saying China flu. Like he's referencing COVID-19. We can understand that he's referencing COVID-19, but the way he's wrapping it up is not the best way possible. So when he's saying theoretical utopia, he's referring to this socialist these socialist talking points or political theory in general, which he's not interested in. And so he's just going to mischaracterize your socialist stuff as theoretical utopia stuff because he's not interested in engaging with it. It's not good faith, but it's what Destiny does. You're talking about a theoretical utopia. That's kind of big. I'm not going to keep highlighting. This is going to take forever. Wait. Nothing I just said is utopia. Notice how we're not focusing on this part. We get to it at the end. Nothing I just said is utopia. I'm not a utopian by any sense. This is not utopian. This is political theory. But this is what frustrates Destiny too, is we run away from, I think, what he's actually getting at with this stuff, in that it's not viable. And every time we get to the viability thing, he'll make fun of them for the electability thing, or he'll say that, like, there's a lot of stuff that's not been viable but got passed. And it's like, yeah, but there's a scale of not viable, right? And I think, like, Medicare for all is somewhere, like, you know, if we have this, like, not viable and viable, like Medicare for all is probably somewhere here leaning towards, like, not viable, right? And then, like, UBI is probably, like, way farther over here, maybe. There's a lot of people we'd have to convince. And, like, we can keep going farther. But if we're talking about where revolution is, or where the dissolution of the class divide between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat lies in here, we're way the fuck over here. Like, we're out of the frame of the camera. Like, we're next door in the next building. That's where that is. It's not going to happen in America. That's not where that's happening. Maybe somewhere else, not here. So that's why he's saying it's utopia. If it's not going to happen in your lifetime, if it doesn't even seem like it's going to happen outside of your lifetime, if it's failed every time it's brought up, if there's an entire system in place called capitalism which is meant to rally against it, if all these people are in control of the government and media the way that you say they are, and they're manipulating things against you, it just seems that this is a battle you're not going to win. Why not just change the shit from within the system and do it that way? Because otherwise, the only way you're going to fix is revolution. If you don't think revolution is going to happen in your lifetime, why are you pushing all this stuff? It's a loop. It's a loop that doesn't make sense. The reason it doesn't make sense is because some part of this doesn't click. I'm not a utopian by any sense. This is not utopian. This is political theory. A personal issue I have with Vaush's approach is that he's always trying to push the revolutionary and leftist stuff low-key and tries to use actual issues and actual policies to slip in his nonsense ideas like this stuff about classes. Framing it that way at the end can poison the well of discussion later, and anyone who sees that disingenuous approach may stand to take issue with it. So this is advice more so for Vaush, is that I think Vaush has to be careful about this, because if people pick up on the fact that he's like high-key pushing revolutionary ideas, even if they're initially bought in on the idea that he seems to be a rational guy and he has a good understanding of, like, the logical foundations of stuff and the way that stuff is working, he's very good at communicating, very rhetorically effective, but then they stick around long enough to catch the revolutionary stuff, I bet there's a lot of people that hightail it out of there. I'm sure there's a ton of people that stay. That's why he's popular. But I just think that a lot of people are going to be turned off by the revolutionary thing. And it's the people that you need to convince to make the revolution happen that are going to be turned off by the revolutionary thing. You have to sell that individually. And if I understand he wants to do it low key because it's unacceptable right now, like generally by people, but based on polling and whatever. So he has to be low key about it. But it almost feels like, I don't know, why not just be outspoken about it in like a proponent of it that's really vocal, like MLK was, like the very guy that you're quoting. Why are you not nearly as outspoken on the revolutionary part of it then? Because that is the inevitable conclusion of a lot of the things you're asking for are a revolution in some shape or form. So even if you say it's not going to happen within your lifetime, the things that you're pushing for are that. And the things that you're talking about are issues that are only going to get solved in your lifetime. Right? Or not all of them, but a lot of the ones we're talking about, like COVID-19, this is not going to be something that goes on for 40 years. You know, or 50 years past when you're dead. No, I think we're painting the picture of something because we want to encourage more revolutionary change in whatever way we can. Maybe it's not actual revolution with guns and stuff. Maybe it's like we have like a massive protest, or like massive shutdowns of business, or I don't know, whatever it is. I think just being more clear and open about that and debating that might be more upfront. That might make me actually want to engage with this. Like if you're actually talking about what you believe in, what I feel like you believe in, then I'm more apt to listen to it. But just as it stands, it seems like you're pushing for something you don't really talk about. Let's continue with the video. I feel like I'm rambling.
Not all things can be
What
solved.
policies are you talking about?
Well, I said worker co-ops. But you can't.
Worker co-ops is how you're going to solve global warming. That's your policy.
No, that's certainly a part of it, though. You do realize, though, that sometimes you have to justify policy through political theory, right? Political theory is the bedrock of.
Hold on. So you have to justify policy with. Do I have this noted? Yeah, I do. You attack him on the persistent suggestion that co-ops are the policies proposed to solve global warming, which contextually comes in the face of his criticism that you have no solutions worth mentioning. So I note that for Destiny. And then we have a pivot. So we go, no, that's certainly a part of it, though. And then he pivots. So let's watch that again for the pivot, because it's not very obvious.
Proposing by policy. Oh, that's certainly.
Okay,
not all things can be
what
solved.
What policies are you talking about?
Well, I said worker co-ops. But you can't.
Worker co-ops is how you're going to solve global warming. That's your
no,
policy.
No, that's certainly a part of it, though. You do realize, though, that.
Okay.
Sometimes you have to justify policy through political theory.
So this is a different argument. We're pivoting off of what Destiny wants to talk about. So again, we've asked about what his solutions were for global warming, because the entire start of this conversation was because he said that Destiny doesn't have policy solutions for, in the clip, broadly speaking, just doesn't have policy issues. I guess the added context before the clip is that he means to say global warming and manufactured consent. Well, they already slashed out unions. They both agree that the unions thing doesn't work because they've talked about it. And technically, they should both agree that the co-ops thing, that we can have the loans, but it doesn't logically or practically solve global warming in any way. And so when asked again, what policy does Vaush have that's for solving global warming? And he says, well, I said the co-ops. And then Destiny's like, well, we went through the co-op thing. It doesn't make sense. Okay. But then he's, no, that's certainly part of it, though. You do realize, though, that sometimes you have to justify. So we're talking at two different levels. So because he was able to get this in here, the socialist part of it, now he's able to get that in again here. So a part of it, though, is actually what we're supposed to be talking about. That's our blue. That's our logic. You do realize, though, that sometimes you have to justify a policy. You have to justify a policy through political theory. This is going to be our purple, because this is all for the sake of the argument the socialism thing is being brought about through. Political theory is the bedrock of proposing solutions to the way the system works today. Without political theory, we are lost. So this is a whole rant about political theory that has absolutely nothing to do with this. It has to do with Destiny's attack on political theory generally, because he doesn't like the socialist thing, and he labels it as a theoretical utopia. But like, this is not a genuine framing of this either. You do realize, though, that sometimes you have to justify a policy through political theory, right? Sometimes, yeah, but oftentimes it's still with the approval of the voters and stuff, which we're not mentioning. That's a problem with this thing. Is like, yeah, we do have to sometimes justify policy through political theory, but that doesn't change the fact that we don't arrive at the policy through revolution, right? That we have to pass it with voting and stuff. And the problem with the socialists is nobody wants to vote for their shit. They can't convince anybody of it. They need to work on convincing people of it. That should be where your focus is. Incremental, changing people's minds, not the revolution stuff. I don't think that you should be pushing that. You do realize, though, that sometimes, okay, whatever. Political theory is the bedrock of proposing solutions to the way the system works today. This is like an added thing that doesn't play any part in our actual conversation. It's mostly just about the political theory thing. Like, this is all stuff that he just has about political theories that he's probably said before and that we're mentioning here. Okay, let's keep going.
right? Political theory is the bedrock of proposing solutions to the way the system works today. Without political theory, we are lost when it comes.
Also, the way that he talks is very speech-like, and it is very eloquent. I'm sure a lot of people like that. I'm sure his fans like it, obviously, because they listen to him all the time. But it can be off-putting for people, and sometimes it can be boring or cringy. It was a little bit cringy at a few points during their conversation together, just because it was like being nice and polite to the point of like eeriness. But when you talk like this and you're talking like you're a speech person or that you're giving some big loaded thing, sometimes it can come across as cringy or a speech like, or people don't want to deal with it. So that's just one thing, a personal note for Vaush to just take note of maybe, is that once you, sometimes you sound like you're a speech or you use words like umbrage, and those can be off-putting to people. Again, to get the revolution happening, you're going to need to convince some people that don't initially agree with you. And there's a lot of people that will be off-put by the way that you speak. And that's just one thing to keep in mind.
Where did we?
But it's like a balance. Like if you want to have that elegance in the way that you talk, you can have that. It's just worth keeping in mind that there's an effect that I don't know if he's aware of or not. That's legitimate. It's not just people making fun of you. It's like, that's honestly how you're going to come off.
I don't need you to proselytize.
Is it really proselytizing? Like more than 7 seconds?
I don't need the speeches. Like you can do that on your stream.
It's
what
it's not a speech. It's important.
What did we say about co-ops? It's not important. It's not relevant at all to this conversation. Obviously, I know that a broad political theory is going to be necessary to enact or to have a framework within which you want to enact any particular policy. That's common sense, brain dead shit, of course. So what?
Obviously, hyperbolic. Destiny shouldn't be doing this, but whatever. It's because he's frustrated. As we've seen by dissecting the actual content of the speech, we're going in a different direction than the conversation is actually going. Let's continue.
What did we talk about regarding co-ops? What did I say? Do you remember?
I don't think we got.
Okay, we're bringing it back to co-ops. Again, that's where we left off. Remember that we talked about at the very point of this conversation was that Vaush said he didn't have any policies. That's what Destiny was upset about. And Destiny claimed that Vaush didn't have these policies. And what are these policies? In particular to global warming, manufacturing consent, we clarified was what Vaush was talking about. So Destiny asked, what are your policies for global warming? And the unions are off the table. They both agree. And so it comes down to co-ops. But they both seem to agree that co-ops are not the way that that's going to be fixed. But then Vaush pivoted to this idea that but putting into place systems where we can take power away from these people is going to dissolve the difference between working class and the proletariat, or sorry, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. This is why you don't talk in these terms, because it's like, just talk like a normal person. Why do you have to talk in the socialist terms? Just do that when you're with socialists, but it's silly to everybody else. Okay, let's keep going.
Not to talk about it very much.
I literally told you I'm okay. I've said this several times to you.
You're okay
I'm
with
fine
them, yeah.
with banks. No, more than that. I said I'm fine with banks giving highly preferential loans to co-ops to see if getting them off the ground is a way to move forward.
Mm-hmm. And I think we talked about how opening up the ability for states to do individual trial runs for like a broader range of policies would be a good way. That was a policy discussion that we had. I thought it was pretty fruitful.
It was barely policy, but sure. But then
and he said they didn't talk about policy, so they actually did talk about policy, and it would seem they both have policies. So both of them are kind of being bad here. Worth noting.
Why would you say that I'm not proposing any solutions to any of these things if you and me are literally both in agreement on the policy level here?
Oh, that's
That's a good point.
one policy. I was
What
talking
other
about
policies do you have?
Okay, but that's one policy. That's one more than none. So we're going to have to be careful.
Well, I said the specific comment I made was with regards to global climate change and with regards to manufacturing.
Yeah, we already made clear that it's about the global warming, the climate change, and the other thing. And we've already we just keep coming back to co-ops. It's the only thing you have, Vaush. Let's see if we get more here.
Consent. Those were the two main things I said. He doesn't have solutions.
Okay, so I have really big proposals regarding climate change. Most of them you oppose. So I'm curious, what are your big ways to deal with?
So Destiny's confident that he has political proposals, and he's confident that his audience is aware of that, and so he's going to push Vaush on what he actually believes, so that he could argue with it. Maybe that's the point there. I don't know, but right now he's pushing Vaush on some examples.
Climate change. Besides, everybody becomes a co-op, which is meaningless.
Well, I don't know how it's meaningless exactly.
Okay, you keep going back to these little things that he says, and again, if Destiny didn't include little words like this, Vaush couldn't have an aside to mention them. Because we really want this to be a linear conversation where we dig down on the fact that he keeps going back to co-ops, because it almost feels like he doesn't have another solution.
Meaningless, because you're not going to make every business a co-op anytime soon. There's no path forward to that, and you can't even begin to propose legislation.
Again, he's arguing the co-op thing, but I thought that we had just moved past the co-op thing. So offering yet another argument to refute it is not going to be helpful, and it doesn't get us anywhere forward.
To get you there. So this is not a real suggestion.
Well, wait. So you think that suggestions are only legitimate if they're pros with?
Oh boy, here we go. So here we go. We're going in another different direction yet again. Let me see if I have it noted. Note that he keeps ignoring the part on more policy solutions because a lot of them you have argued against, and he would not be served well bringing them up while you're in the call. If he has any others, his reluctance to name them seems strange. Yeah, I would agree with Past Me on this. Past Me says that note that he keeps ignoring the part on more policy solutions because a lot of them you have argued against, and he would not be served well bringing them up while you're in the call. If he has any others, his reluctance to name them seems strange. This is in reference to Destiny keeps asking him about this global warming question, and he keeps running away from it. And he's going to keep pivoting to other points that he wants to get in about the socialist thing. And this is another reason why, like, Destiny letting him do this can't happen anymore. That's why he has to shut down these like rants about the socialist thing, is because part of what Vaush wants to do is educate people on the socialist stuff and to present that lens. And I think not platforming that is something Destiny wants to do, I guess, because he doesn't like lefty people. So he wants to shut it down.
Within the grounds of electability, like only if you could get him past the current.
So now we're going to focus on this electability argument thing, because again, electability is a key word that will play really well with lefty people, but again, does not really relate to the question, which is what other policies do you have that are going to work for global climate change? Unless all the policies that he has are impossible to enact, and that's why he's not mentioning them, or impossible to enact is insofar as Destiny would consider it. Which we'll see what it would take to do that here. I don't think anybody thinks in terms of electability until it's like a smell test. Like if something smells like it's probably not electable, like Bernie Sanders putting the label socialist on him, I think we have to pause for a second and like figure out how that's going to work. Or like there's a bit of a smell test here with, let me replay it.
Because you're not going to make every business a co-op anytime soon. There's no path forward to that. And you can't even begin to propose legislation to get you there. So this is not a real suggestion.
Well, wait, so you think that suggestions are only legitimate if they're proposed within the grounds of electability? Like only if you could get...
Yeah, the electability is another smell test thing. It's all just a smell test thing. And that's why I think you can have reason to be upset with it. If it's not like it doesn't really mean a ton, the electability thing. But I think if it doesn't mean a ton, don't try pushing Destiny's arguments into the electability territory unless you mean to be disingenuous and to destroy them there in a way that it doesn't really represent what they are, because he's not concerned with the... and I don't think electability is something that extends to policy and stuff, really. Like, it's more so just like strategical moment to moment. Like, if we don't have the Senate, you're not going to be able to pass something radical. So you have to limit it by like who has control of the Senate, who has control of the House, who is the president, can he veto it? Like, these are things you have to take into consideration. But if you're Vaush and you want to revolutionize stuff and you're not caring about those systems, a lot of other policies are all of a sudden available to you. And because Vaush is viewing things from the revolutionary lens, he's seeing a lot of policy decisions that are possible that Destiny wouldn't even consider. It wouldn't pass a smell test because it's not something that the Democrats would ever push, because it's not something that Democrats would ever win in the House, let alone in the Senate, let alone once it gets to the president's desk. So like they're looking at things from two different frameworks, one from like a practical framework of what can be done today, and the other on this idea, if we revolutionize things and have fundamental changes, then what's possible. And we should look at things in terms of that. These are the two arguments that are kind of coming out ahead here.
Get him past the current Congress. If that's the case, then pretty much nothing's going to be viable. With McConnell and the Senate the way it is.
Okay, so then can I just hear you say that every idea that you have is completely and totally electorally unviable?
Right now, almost everything that had to be passed through Congress would be complete.
So he's kind of hinting at the reason why Vaush isn't saying more stuff is because that stuff isn't politically or electorally viable. And so Destiny's just going to cut to it and ask him, is all that stuff unviable then? Can you just say that so I can get past this and then not talk to you? Because that's Destiny's approach to it. Again, I don't agree with that or disagree with that. I don't think this isn't my thoughts affecting it between them. Destiny's being a dick. Vaush is going off on different directions that are tangential, like that are parallel but not really related to what we're talking about.
Only if you could get him past the current Congress. If that's the case, then pretty much nothing's going to be viable. With McConnell and the Senate the way it is.
Okay, so then can I just hear you say that every idea that you have...
And again, we're going to signal to something that everybody understands. McConnell, the motherfucker who's standing in the way of change, the motherfucker who is literally blocking bills. And I would more so agree that he is obstructionist in a way that Destiny obviously is not, right?
It's completely and totally electorally unviable.
Right now, almost everything that had to be passed through Congress would be completely electorally unviable. Does that mean we
Okay,
shouldn't
so
have
then you're not
conversations?
talking policy then. You don't have like a policy
Wait, wait,
proposal.
See, if we push Destiny into this thing where he has to define electability, and then we push him to use the word electability, which is automatically going to be a turnoff for a bunch of people because they disregard it as silly. If we can push Destiny into accepting electability as a term and then accepting that definition, we can get the whole audience to write him off. And that's, I think, what Vaush is going for here, because if we can push Destiny into this point and he agrees with it, then it seems like Destiny has an unreasonably high bar for considering legislation. And it would seem that if we can start to shake some like belief in that threshold where it's at for Destiny, then we can start to understand why he views so many of Vaush's things as unviable, without, mind you, ever bringing up what Vaush actually believes, which is the goal, I assume, because we haven't brought up anything else that Vaush believes. If we can quash this with the electability thing very early on, then we can introduce Vaush's talking points in an environment where they're more likely to succeed, because those policies won't receive criticism in regards to their electability or viability in either the House or the Senate or with the president. And his ideas work best in an environment where we don't have those predatory factors affecting them. If we don't have to talk about things in terms of their like practical application, whatever, in the current system, then it's all of his ideas are a lot more viable. In a revolutionary framework, Vaush's ideas make sense, but they don't in the practical framework today. And so my main thing is like, just make it work with the practical stuff today, or create a funnel to your revolutionary thinking, which is what he's doing with this language. He could be more effective at it for sure.
So wait, so you genuinely believe there's no point in talking?
But I mean, he's doing a good job at it. If that's what he's doing here to try and push Destiny and the electability thing to catch him on it, like that helps him do that to get people on the revolutionary thing. Because if we can just like close the reputability of Destiny's like distinguish whatever things that he's doing. Sorry, my brain is like fried.
Talking about any
A lot of talking. I need water or something. Holy moly.
political changes that couldn't take place in our current McConnell-run Senate? You
No, we
realize
can
you're
absolutely
limiting
talk about those
limiting
things, but you
viable
can't sit
discourse
here-
to the
you
most
can't- no.
useless, restrictive congressional system we've had in the history of this country. We have to be able to work outside of these grounds because right now there's nothing that can be done within them.
If you want to pass legislation through Congress,
There isn't nothing that can be done within them. And again, we're overstepping in the way that we're trying to paint the system. And it's because it's to Vaush's benefit, because again, we have to keep in mind that Vaush wants revolutionary change. So, or he believes in revolutionary ideals, whether he wants to admit that he thinks those changes could happen in his lifetime or not, I don't know. I mean, he says he doesn't, but he's pushing for revolutionary stuff, so it frustrates me that he keeps saying that, because it makes it really hard for me to talk about this if he doesn't want to be serious about thinking that there's some kind of viability for revolutionary stuff today. I don't know.
and you want to actually fix problems that are impacting people today that don't impact either of us because we both make hundreds of thousands of dollars off of YouTube. We're in the same boat now doing
Why are
that.
you accusing
okay?
me of not
If
being
you
considerate to the needs of the proletariat?
You brought up how much money I made, and for some reason you thought my net worth was relevant.
Oh, let's listen to this.
And you want to actually fix problems that are impacting people today that don't impact either of us because we both make hundreds of thousands of dollars off of YouTube. We're in the same boat now doing
Why
that.
are you accusing
okay?
me of not
If
being
you
considerate to
I don't think he's just putting them both on the same level. He's using the we, and he's painting that they're both in the same exact class of people.
the most useless, restrictive congressional system we've had in the history of this country? We have to be able to work outside of these grounds because right now there's nothing that can be done within them.
If you want to pass legislation through Congress and you want to actually fix problems that are impacting people today that don't impact either of us because we both make hundreds of thousands of dollars off of YouTube, we're in the same boat now doing
Why
that.
are you accusing
okay?
me of not
If
being
you
considerate to the needs of the proletariat?
He didn't say he's not being considerate of the needs of the proletariat there either. That's why I wanted to play that back like 2 or 3 times. Let's listen one more time.
There's nothing that can be done within them.
If you want to pass legislation through Congress and you want to actually fix problems that are impacting people today that don't impact either of us because we both make hundreds of thousands of dollars off of YouTube, we're in the same boat now doing
Why are
that.
you accusing
okay?
me?
If you want to make laws that are going to affect the people that are not us because we have this wealth, but this isn't an accusation that Vaush doesn't already do that. That's saying, if you want to do that, here's the practical way that I see you doing that, or us doing that, because this is a we thing. We are both in the exact same class of people. And that's why it's really weird that Vaush attacked him on his wealth and stuff. And if Vaush downplays this attack, I think it's important that we remember exactly what he said to give context to whatever he's about to say. Let's see. He says he's a very fairly wealthy I'm pretty sure his assets are well over $1 million. It doesn't really matter too much. He's a wealthy person that has a great deal of material and social capital who looks at the class issues and those that push them and says, well, okay, maybe I'd be in favor of worker co-ops or M4A if it was electable and people supported it, but they don't. So, you know.
You have not been considerate to the needs of the proletariat.
You brought up how much money I made, and for some reason you thought my net worth was relevant to the
Why do you keep
argument.
bringing up white college kids if you don't think identity characteristics?
This is like a fine rebuttal by Vaush as far as like being at Destiny's level, but we're getting away from the thing he just said because the thing he just said was silly and it didn't really relate to what Destiny is saying. But it's because he picks up on the implication there of pointing out the class of another person and what they're supporting and the distinction between them and the other people. He realizes that because he used the exact same thing against Destiny. That's why Destiny is making sure to off the bat make sure that we establish you and I are in the same class. So let's make sure that's not a factor in our discussion of these policies and like why we're going for them, because we're literally like in the same position there. So it's not something that really works.
Are relevant to people's opinions.
Because overwhelmingly, the type of people that talk about meaningless cultural
I would love
issues
to see
on Twitter
data on
are
that.
white college. What?
Oh boy, this meaningless cultural issues thing too. I hate that he does this. Because the only time I've heard that is in the Hassan discussion, and when they were talking about meaningless cultural issues, they were not talking about political policy. They were talking about like identity stuff, like Monster Energy and Red Bull and fucking trucks and guns. Well, not gun rights, but like it's other stuff. Soy, Starbucks, that kind of shit. They weren't really talking about actual like policy. So I hope he's not referring to that discussion because he and I talked about that, and he should know.
I would love to see data on that because in my experience, many of the revolutionary vanguard movements inside of this country have been people of color based and usually quite poor as well. The Black Panther Party wanted to burn it all down quite a fucking bit more than Bernie supporters did, and they were not the whitest college aged-ist group, you know?
Yeah, give me 2 minutes and I can try to find it for you. There's a big article about how there's a massive overrepresentation of white men on Twitter that are college educated that support Bernie Sanders.
Well, that's not quite the same. I would agree with that. I mean, wouldn't white men be
That was
disproportionately
literally the
represented
argument
on
that I just gave you. That people on Twitter are massively white, college educated, and privileged when they come on and they argue and they champion the fuck out of Bernie
Twitter? Okay,
Sanders.
so you're against accelerationist rhetoric when it comes to burning the
Wait,
system,
why are we
right?
pivoting away from the
I'm not, wait,
policy thing?
wait. No, this is very relevant, I promise you.
Wait,
You're
no,
against
I wanted to talk about policy. We're going back to utopia. Let's talk about policy in terms of climate change.
What utopian argument did I just make?
Oh, okay, hold on. Let's re-listen.
That was literally the argument that
I
I just gave you. That people on Twitter are massively white, college educated, and privileged when they come on and they argue and they champion the fuck out of Bernie
Okay,
Sanders.
so you're against accelerationist rhetoric when it comes to burning the
Wait,
system,
why are we
right?
pivoting?
Oh, that's another pivot to the socialist shit. So the accelerate, he does this, and like I think it's really important that we pointed that out from the beginning so we could see how many times it happens. Let's go ahead and listen again.
White, college educated, and privileged when they come on and they argue and they champion the fuck out of Bernie
Okay,
Sanders.
so you're against accelerationist rhetoric when it comes to burning the
Wait,
system,
why are we
right?
Ah, it's a pivot. Okay,
pivoting away from the
I'm not, wait,
policy thing?
wait. No, this is very relevant, I promise you.
Wait,
You're
no,
against
I wanted to talk
it's very relevant. I promise you. Yeah, but
about policy. We're going back to utopia. Let's talk about policy in terms of climate change.
What utopia?
the utopia thing again. I wish Destiny wouldn't say utopia. He's referencing any kind of like political theory language or fucking socialist language. Anytime he hears that, it's a Z's fest. He tunes out.
An argument that I just make.
You're telling me that
I thought Vaush did a substandard defense of his attacks. Okay, well, we'll go through this.
you just want to talk about solutions that are completely and totally
Unless there is something outside of this video that you're referencing, in which case, Strimmer, if you want to post that in the Discord, which if you type !Discord, it should give you a link to it. I don't even care if you stay joined. If you just want to join and then leave your message and then, bounce, you're more than welcome to. But if you want to link a different video from Vaush where he talks about this, I'm happy to review it.
politically unviable.
Right now,
How
almost
is that-
any
how is that
solution. Right now, almost any
No, it's
solution
not.
is politically
How
unviable.
about bringing back multilateral trade agreements to the table? These are the ones.
McConnell would sit it on the table. He wouldn't have a vote on it.
So Republicans are opposed to things like NAFTA and the TPP and everything now? The Republicans would be completely not okay with any type of like...
This is yes.
Yeah, now they're having a policy discussion. I'm happy. So I have no comments here. I'm like, as far as their particulars on the policy discussion, I don't care. I just want to see a policy discussion. That's what we were meant to do in this conversation. We're finally doing it.
No, do you think there's value in discussing things that you don't believe McConnell would be willing to have a vote held on?
Oh, but we're going to keep going back to the electability thing because Vaush's main thing is the electability thing. So we're going to keep going back to that.
I think that you can get votes on stuff like trade policy.
Maybe a few things. Yeah, he doesn't shelf every bill, but most stuff, hundreds of bills been sitting on his desk. Most stuff is not currently viable. However, I do think a really big part of political discourse is not just the literal physical legislation that you put through, but the broader ideological pushes you make to legitimize certain types of bills. That's how we got.
Yeah, but this is getting away from the chief criticism that started this whole conversation, which was that Destiny said that there were no policy solutions to these two problems. And at first it started as all the problems, and then we reduced it down to just global warming and the other one because there was context to the clip that we missed out on. And now we've asked Vaush several times about what his solutions were that he gave for global warming. The only one that he said 3 times in a row has been co-ops, which they both disagree fixes the problem. And then every time we stick him on the co-op thing not being effective in any way, shape, or form because the workers could easily choose to do things that are bad the same way unions could. He pivots to either this electability thing or what is the other one? I mean, I can look at it, but they're both not tangential to this. They're both points that Vaush thinks is the problem and he wants to confront, but he's not being super upfront about those being the problems that he wants to talk about. He should diffuse this policy discussion and admit about being wrong about that. But he won't, and Destiny won't let him go until he will. So Destiny's focused on this one thing, and Vaush is focused on these outside things. The problem with that is the outside things that Vaush is focusing on are things that Destiny explicitly doesn't want to talk about in the conversation. Whether we think that's annoying or good or bad or good faith or bad faith, whatever, that's the fact of the matter in this conversation, is that Destiny is not going to engage with any of the socialist rhetoric, so you have to not use it. But Vaush is having a really hard time not using it, and I think what this is bringing to light is how often that stuff comes up, and now Destiny's shutting him down every single time it comes up.
There are levels of discourse that we can have, though. We can have a conversation about, well, what's possible under a McConnell Senate? Not very much. We could have a conversation about, well, what's more possible if we flip the Senate? That's a conversation that we can have. Those are the conversations I'm interested in. The conversation of, well, what if we eradicate the class structure and make every single business co-op? Not interested in that. It's fantastical, delusional bullshit.
Wait. Why do you insist on making these ridiculous arguments? I've never said that everything that I propose has to be done in the context of a worker social society. And what's more, it's not utopian.
Okay, let's rewind and see if
could
that's
have a conversation about, well, what's more possible if we flip the Senate? That's a conversation that we can have. Conversation about, well, what's possible under a McConnell Senate? Not very much. We could have a conversation about, well, what's more possible if we flip the Senate? That's a conversation that we can have. Those are the conversations I'm interested in. The conversation of, well, what if we eradicate the class structure and make every single business co-op? Not interested in that. It's fantastical, delusional bullshit.
Wait. Why do you insist on making these ridiculous arguments? I've never said that everything that I propose has to be done in the context of a worker.
But he didn't say that.
Those are the conversations I'm interested in. The conversation of, well, what if we eradicate the class structure and make every single business co-op?
This eradicating the structure and doing the co-ops thing is literally what we talked about here. That's literally word for word. Vaush said that. Vaush makes the pivot after Destiny says, I've given you contrary evidence that unions stand in the way of a lot of environmentally friendly things, and I've demonstrated that just by having a co-op, even on a logical or deductive level, doesn't mean that you would be opposed to things that might hurt the environment. That doesn't make sense. He says, yes, but however, large, broad-spanning policies that overall serve the disinterest of the working class that benefited the ruling class would be broken apart by a dissolution of the class divide between bourgeoisie and proletariat. And we already fought that with the theoretical utopia thing. We already know there's a landmine on that topic if we're Vaush, so we want to be careful about that. Destiny is not going to have like a logical conversation about socialist stuff. But it's important to remember, Vaush said this, and Vaush brought this here, so let's re-listen again.
We can have a conversation about, well, what's possible under a McConnell Senate? Not very much. We could have a conversation about, well, what's more possible if we flip the Senate? That's a conversation that we can have. Those are the conversations I'm interested in. The conversation of, well, what if we eradicate the class structure and make every single business co-op? Not interested.
What if we eradicated the class structure and made every business a co-op? Well, the every business a co-op thing was something that they touched upon before about the co-ops, and then this is where that if we broke up the working class and the ruling class, he literally says that here. That's what he said about in defense of his co-op thing. Okay. And if this is confusing people, it's because he put this here and it's referencing something else not related to this. The large, broad-spanning policies that overall serve the disinterest of the working class that benefit the ruling class is all one noun. This is all one noun, guys. This is one noun. The large, broad-spanning policies that overall serve the disinterest of the working class that benefited the ruling class. Like, we could replace this and say bad laws. Yes, but however, bad laws would be broken apart by a dissolution of the class divide. Obviously, he's not meaning to say bad laws, but I'm saying all of this represents one noun. And by the time we got to the end of the noun, we don't really know what it encompasses or what the identifiers are on it. Large, broad-spanning policies tells us something about the actual policies themselves, And then what are the policies doing? Well, they're policies that overall serve the disinterest of the working class and benefit the ruling class. The language is loaded here. We don't have to say it like this. If we are stuck in the socialist framework of explaining things, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be wordy. People aren't going to want to engage with it. That's why nobody wants to read the socialist books either. So that's what I'm saying with socialists. You guys should like modernize the way you talk about this stuff in a way that makes sense to American people if you want to push this in America, or just modernize it in any way that's going to apply for everybody that doesn't sound like this, because this sounds really like gnarly. Like we could easily make this like Bernie Sanders talk, like populist talk, and that would be 10 times more effective. I'm not advocating for populism necessarily, but I'm saying that there's a lot of ways off the top of my head I can think of that we could reword this. And that might be one place to look, is how Bernie Sanders approaches these kinds of discussions, and looking at the language that he uses, tweaking it to where it's not super populist and cringy, and then you're good to go. But yeah, Vaush mentions this.
Interested in that. It's fantastical, delusional bullshit.
Wait.
The conversation of, well, what if we eradicate the class structure and make every single business co-op? Not interested in that. It's fantastical, delusional bullshit.
Wait. Why do you insist on making these ridiculous arguments? I've never said that everything that I propose has to be done in the context of a worker social society.
Yeah, Destiny didn't say that either, and now we know that 100%.
And what's more, it's not utopian.
I have no proposals just because McConnell won't pass things in the Senate.
Because I was specifically talking about.
And this is why it makes it hard to listen to Vaush if Destiny is not being consistent on like hearing him out on the logical end of things. Because notice how Destiny didn't respond to that. Destiny jumps to the other thing, the criticism that he had made of Destiny before. And so we don't really touch on these things that Vaush is doing. Like what he just said was not correct. Like he literally brought that thing up. And that wasn't the characterization of his argument that Destiny was making either. So in any case, it's like an argument against a ghost. It doesn't exist. It's a lot like when I was talking about what Destiny was doing in his conversation on that Scuff podcast with Hassan. It feels like he attacks an argument that doesn't exist because he's saying something that nobody said, or he's using terms that have not occurred in the conversation, or he's literally saying something that happened 5 minutes ago and it's not true. It's not the proper characterization, and it's not close to what the truth is. Or it's close enough to where I don't know when I listen to it in real time. This is why I say that I have to be super careful about Vaush's videos. I have to be super careful about Philosophy Tube's videos and a few other people, because I've listened back and been very careful about my listening, and I see a lot of like inconsistencies that make me worried about like passively listening to these people. I think passively listening to people that are really good at rhetoric can be troublesome. Like you should be careful about that. I mean, if you just want to prescribe to somebody's ideas and like receive them, that's fine. Like even with Destiny, and this is something we touched on the Twitter thing. What do I mean by dangerous? Well, you're dangerous in an argument. Yeah, for sure. And I think that it's a tool, whether we want to label it as dangerous or not, whatever, the same way we want to label a gun as dangerous or not. The tool, the rhetoric, the way that you're choosing your words very carefully can also be used to hide what you're saying, or to like say things in a way that's not true, but it sounds true. And then you look back and you realize that it wasn't. Arguing against a ghost, is that the same as a straw man? I don't like saying straw man. So I try to avoid these terms that an explanation is due. So for anybody just joining us, like I don't think I've seen Barbarizer in here before. What I do professionally all day is I work on essays. Like right now I'm taking a lot of pro bono work on COVID-19 stuff, and most of that is helping people get their work edited so it can get published, and it can, or a lot of internal emails and stuff that I've had to review and check against like research documents to make sure we're good before they go out. But the bulk of what I do normally is I help graduate students with their final projects. So if you want to get your master's or your doctoral, oftentimes you have to submit a research proposal or a dissertation, or if you're getting your MBA, you have a giant business proposal that you have to do. All of these majors are going to have their different things, but it typically is a big written project that can be difficult to do, that you're working with a board with, and they give you like edits and recommendations and stuff like that. And so I help them write the whole thing from scratch, of course, but there's an awful lot of people that just come in needing help with editing. So that's what I do all day. So I've done that since I was in middle school. So since I was in middle school, I started doing papers for people. By the time I was a senior in high school, I did my very first master's paper, and it was in behavioral science, and it was on like, it was CBT in children. So how can we use cognitive behavioral therapy with children, and it was on a few different things. So stuttering was something I did a little bit on. That's why I brought us back to the stuttering thing for Biden, because I thought I have a little bit of info in this and I could like brush up on it and then give like a impassioned thing. But that's what I do all day. So I do that. I deal with argument all day. I'm not super into like all this internet stuff. Like I listen to a lot of like Destiny and a few other debate people, but when he started saying that he could use help with rhetoric, I was like, well, that's all I do all day. I advise people on rhetoric. I help them with their arguments all day. That's literally my job. So it'd be cool if I could help him. And that's what I aim to do with videos like this too, is I'm breaking down what these people are saying, maybe some tools they're using, how you could implement that in your own life. I try to open up Notion and color code stuff for you guys and break it down in a very visual way. And then I hope to get all these videos onto YouTube so that if at any point anybody is curious about a debate or argument, they have supplemental materials they can go back to maybe get a different level of depth. Now, people already do this with videos, right? Where they say like they respond to something or they give their take on it or whatever. But I tend to see those as almost like a debate against whatever the thing is, rather than like an actual analysis of the conversation itself. So what I aim to do is provide an analysis of these conversations themselves. What are the points being mentioned? What are the tools that we're using? What does this mean? How could they do this better? Why is this effective versus this? How is this effective against an audience that's not for either of these people? How does this work against people who are uninformed? All of these questions are things that I have to answer in papers all day. If we're going to publish a piece of work that's going to be an informational document for people all across the United States on how to handle COVID-19 or hand washing procedures, we're going to have to write that for the average person. That needs to be edited for that. If we're going to be publishing something in an academic paper, our audience is very different. We're going to have to take that into account. If we're arguing with Vaush and all we care about is convincing Vaush, all we need to structure our argument around is to convince Vaush and to make sure that we don't say something that would get his audience to not let him agree with something. So don't say something that'll upset the audience to the point where they won't let the influencer agree with you. That's the only little thing you have to keep in mind when trying to convince an influencer. But things like this, framing things this way, showing you guys my perspective and my take on these arguments, I figure might be interesting. And it's certainly different than how I've seen other people talk about this stuff. So I just hope to give you that. Let's go ahead and continue on this video.
Global climate change and
I
manufacturing.
talked about global climate.
Oh, that's why I hate things like straw man and even rhetoric now that I'm hearing it used improperly all the time. I feel like these words have lost their meaning, and their meaning, I think, should be stuck to the context of debate and argument. And a lot of the time they get used in like modern conversational speech. And I don't think people are arguing in modern conversational speech. And if they are, it's not formally, so it doesn't deserve these fallacies and other things that you're applying to them. They don't really work like that, because simply saying that something's a fallacy doesn't make the whole thing fall apart the way that Destiny feels like it does. And other people feel like it does. It's important to keep that in mind, that other people don't think like that. And so it's not super convincing to just say it's a straw man.
Climate change. What are your policy positions on global climate change?
I don't think right now there are any policy positions.
Like, I feel like arguing with the ghost is a lot more like visual and I don't know, communicates like what I feel more. Because it's like, bro, who the fuck are you talking to? Like, you're not talking to a straw man. You're talking to a fucking ghost. I can't even see it, bro. It's invisible. Fucking doesn't exist. And you're spooking me out.
Really talking about global climate change and
But I
manufacturing.
talked about global climate change. What are your policy positions on global climate change?
I don't think right now there are any
What-
policy positions that are viable within our current government that could do anything to prevent the catastrophe to come. I think it's
There we go. So to prevent the catastrophe to come, this is, again, because we want to push the revolutionary ideology stuff. And to do that, we have to paint a picture that America is so down the shitter that we're not going to be able to solve things through our conventional means. I'm just going to start referring to that as revolutionary rhetoric so that I don't have to keep explaining that over and over. And I just hope I don't get clipped out of context. And if I do, I'm going to point to this clip where I said I'm going to start saying revolutionary rhetoric, and it's just going to be a phrase that I made up, and the definition is going to be exactly what I've said fucking 10 times in a row repeated. I feel I always use beg the question wrongly. Yeah, and beg the question could be another thing where if people hear that, they start to like take it a different way, or they think you're condescending or all these other problems. And so I tend to avoid stuff like that in general. Like if I tell somebody on the phone, a client, and I'm like, I think you're straw manning me. I didn't say that. Like, because I didn't say something in an email. Like I would be like, okay, I'll check the email, but I'm pretty sure I said blah, 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 didn't I? Or like, that's so weird because I took notes before I wrote the email and I specifically crossed out doing this. So if that's not in the email, that's really worrisome. I guess I just messed up. And like, when they know that you have other systems in place greater than their own to be keeping checks on stuff, people that bullshit you will give up really quick. This doesn't apply to the Vaush thing. This is like in response to your question, to be clear. And so, that's often something I'll use and something I actually do in the office. Like I keep notes on like everything, especially for calls and stuff.
Flip the Senate?
Even if we flip the Senate, I don't, because anything
so
severe
then-
enough to actually make positive change would do a ridiculous decrease in the productivity of our
So even if we flip the Senate, no.
You have
industry.
no policy suggestions. Why would you accuse me of that?
Well, that's
You're literally
because
the one
Okay, there we go. This is the central contention. Let's see how he responds.
here saying you
because
don't
that's
have
the
any policy
difference.
suggestions.
I don't think solutions need to only be policy based. I think that
Because he doesn't think solutions only need to be policy based. But guys, this is a reframing of what the actual problem is. This is a reframing of what the actual problem is. The actual problem is the issue of not. The issue is saying he has no solutions, as if you do, but you don't.
broader ideological movements can also be a great way of changing the way countries
Which broader ideological movement is going to help us with climate change?
only be
I mean, not that he doesn't. Vaush does have his solutions, but it's unfair to say that Destiny doesn't.
policy based. I think that broader ideological movements can also be a great way of changing the way countries
Which broader
function.
ideological movement is going to help us with climate change?
Well, a populist socialist movement would probably lead towards a great deal of class antagonism that might manifest in some way in the ability to electorally restrict some of these businesses. That happened back at the turn of the century, back in the 1900s, 2000s.
Oh, sorry. Oh, fuck.
Broader ideological movements can also be a great way of changing the way countries
Which broader
function.
ideological movement is going to help us with climate change?
Well, a populist socialist movement would probably lead towards a great deal of class antagonism that might manifest.
Oh boy, here we go. Here we go again. This is why he's going to start yawning. Let's listen to this word for
Climate
word.
change.
Well, a populist socialist movement would probably lead towards a great deal of class antagonism that might manifest in some way in the ability to electorally restrict some of these businesses. That happened
Do you see how that's really roundabout? Do you see how that's really, really not strong when we isolate it like that? It sounds strong because the words and the way he says them are really, really good. But then if we listen back to his actual like question and response, it's way more clear that Vaush is avoiding stuff. And like if we look at the chat, this is what we
back
have
at the
going
turn of
on.
the century, back in the 1900s, 2000s.
Oh, sorry. Oh, fuck. I fell asleep. I'm sorry.
Why are you?
Wait,
Wait.
Utopia?
What?
Okay.
No, I was talking about something that's happened time and time again in this country before, which is just socialist sentiment increasing a populist uprising against robber barons. Why are you acting in such bad faith? This is legitimately
You're literally
disappointing.
telling me because you
This
have
has happened
dumbass
before.
Okay, so I feel like this is downplaying like what he's actually going for here. Like we're gonna go back to like FDR and stuff, but like that was a crazy like that motherfucker went 4 terms and I don't know. Okay, we're just gonna continue
out here saying
because I'm not gonna be tackling the political stuff, but we're gonna look at these arguments and what these arguments are like.
no, because you're literally saying you're doing this weird fucking thing where you're reaching to this MLK quote to try to compare me to a white moderate and then saying, well, it's not racialized. You're trying to bring up the level of wealth I have, like it's
That's fair.
influencing my arguments.
wait, you
and
bring
you're
up
trying to
That's fair.
make this argument, and then I'm not bringing that up to you. I don't. I bring it up in general when I talk about there's a big problem with the
Oh,
overall.
well, I didn't bring it up directly to you either. I brought it up
You
to you
literally
here.
directly brought
Yeah, that was a bad argument from Destiny, and so Vaush kind of got him.
up my net
Wait,
worth.
you brought up the race of the people that you have ideological
I know,
predispositions
wait,
against.
you
on Twitter.
understand that
He did, but it's because he's referencing the makeup of the people on the internet platform because it's relevant to tackling the idea of identity that these guys are levying against Destiny. It just feels like sometimes we say these things and we don't have like all of the other context of all of the other stuff. So when they're making little arguments like this that are petty, it's just like a back and forth that's not super productive.
when I'm having a conversation with you, I'm not bringing this up. But when you're having a conversation with me, you are bringing this up. I don't throw the white whatever bullshit liberal at you. You are throwing my net worth at me.
Wait,
I
no,
don't know if
I
it's
didn't. I just said it on stream. You said the white thing on
Yes,
stream.
I
Directly
know,
to you.
I did not say that Vaush is just another white liberal.
So the distinction he's making here is he's not levying these things specifically at Vaush, but he levies them in general at the broad coalition of people on the internet because the broad coalition is the only thing that's relevant to. So you can't take an individual and apply these broad sweeping things to them. And I would agree. I think that's what Vaush is getting at. But like, that's what he's doing. Destiny is not taking this and applying it to a single person. He did it broadly as far as the race thing, the white people on Twitter thing. Although I still don't think it's good, as I've said before, but it's important to make that distinction here.
Whatever bullshit. You did say you brought up my net worth in some way.
Is it just a personal thing then? Okay, so wait. I don't think it's a matter of being demeaned. I think it's just a fact that people's material circumstances influence how they tend to behave, whether that be
Okay,
race
then
or
we're in
wealth.
the same class then, dog. So what does that say about your utopia or your ideas about your class struggle or whatever?
Well, it would mean that if I did end up making a tremendous amount of money, or more than I do currently, I would be a class trader, certainly. But I'm not saying individuals can only act in accordance with behavior prescribed by their,
This
condition.
is such a weasly argument.
Wait,
Yeah. Do you guys agree? Do you see how that's weasly? I don't really want to explain it, but we're just gonna keep going. If anybody asks, I'll explain it.
Wait. Okay. I'm not trying to be like bad faith or antagonistic. As I see it, we both believe, generally speaking, that people's behavior can be influenced by their conditional
This is
circumstances.
so weasely right now. Holy shit.
I don't
can't believe
understand.
you're doing
I
this.
genuinely don't. Can you explain to me? I
Tell
don't
me what you
understand.
don't agree with. When you bring up out of nowhere, totally unprovoked, my net worth, your goal there is to poison the well, to make it so that everything I say is tainted with my class. Like it's somehow an argument against what I'm saying. Do you deny that that's what you're doing?
That your behavior is possibly tainted by your class. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, but the possibly tainted by your class and making it as an argument for like why he, it's not what's happening. This is what frustrates me about Vaush. That's not what happened.
My net worth, your goal there is to poison the well, to make it so.
I think that this is really, really fair. That this is 100% what he meant by this. So he should just own up to it. But he's saying Destiny is compromised because he's wealthy. Yes, that it's going to have some effect on him. Yes, and he's pointing to that effect that could be having on his beliefs to discredit Destiny to his audience. That is 100% what he means to do here. Okay, so we'll see what he says about this. But I am like 100% convinced that is what he means here. So this response seems inadequate as fuck.
So that everything I say is tainted with my class. Like it's somehow an argument against what I'm saying. Do you deny that that's what you're doing?
That your behavior is possibly tainted by your class. Absolutely, yeah.
That your behavior is possibly tainted by your class? Let's fucking listen to the beginning of this video again. Let's listen. Okay, so we want this to be at 16:05. We're going to come back to this. This is the difficulty of Vaush, is that he's really good at rhetoric. So explaining the issues that I see in it, or where I think he's disingenuous, which sometimes happens, is difficult. It's going to take a bit of work. So we're going to have to come back to 16:05 after listening to the first clip and having context, because I don't think he's saying this in the way that it happened.
What? Why? Wait, really?
I can't start earlier than 28 seconds on this clip? What is this site?
And that's where
Or maybe that's where it's actually starting. This is just like a Chrome.
and that's where the issue is they at the same time.
Yeah, you'll notice Destiny never actually proposes solutions to any of these huge problems, because he doesn't have any. His goal here is just be a stopgap, essentially a white moderate. He is essentially doing the thing that MLK complained about in the Burma.
Why do all of these fucking losers who've never read a single nothing said to Vaush the model of the planet is that I can't even see whatsoever policy? Stupid. I love the
Date on this.
debate with ironically say I don't want to talk about policy when you fucking utopian the United that could do they're unusual anymore. If you talk
all day,
more lefties about
9 a.m.
okay, wait,
Wait, we need
like this so like the policy.
play the video.
When is this?
And that's where
What is the date on this? Debate with Eric Striker.
Oh no, this was recent. Fuck, dude, Ian, you're so fucking stupid. I love you, but you're such a fucking moron. Like, how can you?
Assets are well over $1 million. It doesn't really matter too much. He's a wealthy person who, he's a for change, but he's very, very interested in putting shackles on the people who
Okay, we're going to play this again. We're going to look at my notes and we're going to go through it.
complained about in the Birmingham letter. People who oppose, it's not because he's white, by the way, because this isn't a racialized conversation, but it's fundamentally, he doesn't have like a solution or a timetable for change, but he's very, very interested in putting shackles on the people who are more concerned about change than he is, He's a fairly wealthy, I'm pretty sure his net assets are well over $1 million. It doesn't really matter too much. He's a wealthy person who has a great deal of material and social capital, who looks at the class issues of those who push for them and says, well, okay, sure, maybe, I'd be in.
Let's go back to 16:05.
You're doing?
That your behavior is possibly tainted by your class. Absolutely, yeah.
Possibly tainted by your class. That is not at all a fair characterization of what Vaush said. These unfair characterizations of both what Vaush has said in the past, done in the past, and others have, for both of those categories of actions, that is my problem, is that when he goes back to the past to talk about something that happened or what he said or what he did or what somebody else said or what they believed or what they did, oftentimes I find issues in that. And where else do I see that personally in my own life? I see that a lot with some students. Some students will come to me, and it's the students that have, and I talked about this at the beginning of the talk, so for anybody that missed it or saw it and will be upset that I'm repeating it, I'm sorry. Oops. At work, when I sometimes there are students that will come to me with, mind you, these are like 50-page papers, and I notice that a few of their quotes are misattributed, or they have a few words wrong, or they have a few things changed, or they're not from the right page. These are all little indicators to me that we have an issue in sourcing. So when I see an issue in sourcing, it's very, very rare that we only have one or two problems, because typically when people do sourcing, especially when they need to constantly cite stuff, they either do it the right way every single time or they don't. I'm not saying that this same duality applies to Vaush in any way, shape, or form, but it's a habit that's bad. And some people get into a habit where they don't care about the way that they are referencing something, or they don't care about how far they stretch like a parenthetical citation, or they don't care if they change like a few words without brackets in a quote. And these are like little problems, but once they get to IRB, or once, God forbid, you publish that and you fucked it up, like it's problematic. And your IRB, your review board, will almost always like tell you something about it and have you change it. But what I tell students, where like at page 2 or 3 into a 50-page paper, I notice that we're having these issues on almost every single source that I look up. I tell them, be honest with me. Did you source everything in here properly? Did you cite everything properly? And did you quote everything properly? Yes? Okay. Well, because I'm looking at page 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I found 3 errors in your citations. Okay, and this is not good, because that indicates to me that it's going to be very time consuming to edit this paper, because we're going to have to look at every single parenthetical you have, and you have like 50 sources. So that's a lot of reading, that's a lot of checking, and especially if we're putting a parenthetical, which just means we wrote a sentence and we're saying that our ideas in the sentence came from somewhere or are the conclusions of another paper, but not in their exact wording. So we're just going to put parentheses at the end with the source. Those are the easiest to fudge, because you could write whatever, put the source, and hope that nobody checks it. And a lot of students will put the source, and then we go to the source, and sometimes the source wasn't even talking about that. Sometimes the source came to the opposite conclusion about that, like what Destiny found, I think, with the striker debate, that one of his sources like comes up with an entirely different conclusion, but the dude wants to focus on some of the points that the people identified. Like they want to focus on 1 or 2 points, not the 5 to 7 that made up the conclusion, and they want to disregard the conclusion. And they just want to go off of a couple of points that they said were parts of issue that the study uncovered. Things like this are bad. And the people that do this make me have to read their shit really, really carefully, especially when they tell me that they're not doing it. So when I ask a student, hey, are you properly citing and sourcing and quoting all this? And they say yes. And I go, well, you've made mistakes 3 times in the like 4 pages that I've been here. And if we have to fix this, it's going to take a long time. And if we don't fix it right now, because I'm just going to go through the rest of this paper, assume that you did all these sources correct, and I'm not going to check them. But if we put these to an edit, they're going to ask you for edits, and they're going to add like 4 weeks onto your schedule. So unless you want to take that extra time later, just be honest with me right now. What is your process for citing and sourcing? What are you doing? Where is your outline? How are you copying your quotes? What are you doing with that? Are you getting rid of non-printed characters? How are you sourcing stuff? How are you keeping track of sources as you're going along? Are you constantly adding to a works cited page as you're doing this? Do you have a running list? Do you have a bunch of Chrome tabs open? I ask them particulars about their process, because certain things that they do in that process will indicate to me, no, they are not really doing this correctly. And oftentimes, once I start finding those, I go, oh, okay, this is what I think the proper way to cite stuff is. It's fairly easy. It's straightforward, whatever. You should probably use this in the future, because it avoids issues that you're running into with your system. And then we go through it. And the reason why I hear them out on their system first is A, to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that's not what they're doing. B, if there are any major problems, I can figure out what those are and give them advice specific to their major problems instead of broad sweeping advice that I could just give right off the bat, because I find that's less helpful. So that kind of anxiety that I have about people that misquote or misattribute sources is the same anxiety I have when I listen to Vaush, because I know that Vaush frequently does this, where he mischaracterizes things that have happened in the past. It makes him really slippery to have to listen to, because I'm constantly trying to keep tabs on like, okay, he said this here, so keep that in mind. His position on this was this here, or like Destiny said this, or like anytime he makes a claim and Destiny puts a bunch of like resistance into it. The very first time I watched this, I was like, damn, I'm going to have to talk to Destiny about how shit he was. And like I opened up my Notion and I started taking notes for Destiny. And then I was kind of realizing that there was this low-key problem with Vaush, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. So then I rewatched it, and I'm like, oh, that's what it is. We have two conversations going on. So there's the conversation on the socialism level, which Destiny won't engage with, and then there's the conversation about the actual thing that Vaush said, which is why Destiny called, which is that he said that Destiny's not doing any policy. He has no policy solutions. And these two different conversations are constantly running in parallel. There's always that parallel conversation that's about socialism and revolutionary thinking and political ideologies and stuff that's always running with Vaush on the side. It's something he always wants to push. It's just that it gets in the way of some of the things he says, because then he says...
Totally unprovoked, my net worth. Your goal there is to poison the well, to make it so that everything I say is tainted with my class. Like it's somehow an argument against what I'm saying. Do you deny that that's what you're doing?
That your behavior is possibly tainted by your class. Absolutely.
That your behavior is possibly tainted by your class is as not the same. And it feels really disingenuous when we've looked at his behavior over the entire rest of the talk. These little things for me are pet peeves. So I could very well be overplaying the issues that I see with Vaush, because outside of this, he's very rhetorically effective. It's just that these little things that he does that I feel like are sweeping problems under the rug, I don't like. And I just wish he wouldn't do these things. But I think wiggling out of stuff like this is a very cool skill if you have it. I just don't think it's a very ethical skill. It's not a skill that I would encourage people to do. Much the same way that being hyperbolic could easily be a good tool for you. It could easily make fun of people or put them down or establish you as dominant or whatever. There's a million ways Destiny uses hyperbole that works for him. But I generally discourage it because it's something that's not ethical, and it's going to cause problems with people, because anybody that pays attention for it and notices it and points it out as a recurring flaw is letting people tune into something that they will see a million fucking times over and over and over again. Much the same way that once I pointed out this kind of habit that Vaush has, we see it happen through the video over and over and over again. Everybody has these. I have these. I say like all the time. It fucks me up. I have more important ones that I don't care to, say, but I'm sure people will find them as I continue to talk. People will find issues that maybe even I'm not aware of. This is an issue that Vaush has that I just want to point out. Can you quote a source if your source's conclusion disagrees with you? Yeah, you can. You just have to be careful about how you're using that. So the way Eric Stryker was using this is very different. His implication, he was appealing to the ethos of the people that wrote the paper when the people that wrote the paper didn't agree with him. And he only used a few points of the paper and prescribed an entirely opposite conclusion from what the people in the paper said. And then Destiny said what the people in the paper said, and the guy argued against it when he read the paper offering that conclusion in the first place. So yeah, if you argue with a source and you cite it, at least in my work, if you're doing like an academic paper, you could note that the source has something problematic in it. Like you can give a little caveat for it. But it depends on what you're looking for in the source. It really does. Because there are other things that sources can say. So for instance, there could be a source that is saying an entirely different reason for why it thinks something happened, but it could like list a bunch of prior work. Like it could come to other conclusions that would be helpful to you, or it could put a lot of sources in one place that can be helpful for you, even if the conclusion isn't in line with what you're doing. But the conclusion shouldn't disagree with you. That would be strange. There's not many cases where like the conclusion disagrees with you. In your citing a source, unless you're trying to do something like groundbreaking, because remember that we're just building upon existing material. So like when I pick a topic for a really big research proposal, the way that I select it is I have to look at what is already existing in the literature and find gaps in it. So like if I see a recurring pattern, like, there seems to be this thing that's released in autistic people's brains that when they have a fever response that seems to reduce their tantrums that they have. Oh, okay, awesome. That's kind of strange. I wonder why that is. Is it a fever response or is it the actual fever and inflammation of the brain? Let's find out. So they look into it. They figure out that there's a chemical in the brain that's released when you have a fever response that can be induced without a fever, so we can have it independent of the swelling of the brain and still have the chemical released. And it's the chemical being released that seems to moderate the mood of in mice with developmental disorders. And so, okay, interesting. So we can probably deduce that it's not the actual physical inflammation of the brain during a fever response. It's leading autistic people to slow down on their tics or on their outbursts or things like that's correcting the behavior. It's this little chemical that's a response to fever. And if we can just put a bunch of the chemical in there, then it produces the same thing that the fever response does, which helps us limit what's probably causing that. And then we can look at other studies. Maybe other studies say that when women are pregnant and they have an infection response, which includes fever response and includes the release of this chemical or other chemicals of its family, then they have a significantly higher chance of having a child with autism. Oh, well, that's interesting. So fever or infection response in mothers seems to correlate with this autism thing and autism diagnosis in their kids. So when they're pregnant and they have some kind of infection or an immune response or a fever, that the kids have this issue, and that the issue in its symptoms seem to, or at least the behavioral ones, seem to be calmed down when they have fever response in a lot of these kids. Like, that's really interesting. Nobody's talked about this connection between the behavioral thing here, the phenomena of behavior being improved with fever response in autistic kids, and the infection response of pregnant mothers. Nobody's connected all three. So I make a proposal and I say, hey, in this study, we're saying that this chemical has been linked to the reduction in behavior, whatever, and we see that that's an anecdotal thing that's happened in a bunch of qualitative studies that have looked into autistic behavior, and we can see a trend that when they have a fever response, it improves their emotions and whatever, and we see that an immune response in mothers seems to be correlated to a prevalence of autism in their offspring. Okay. Interesting. We have the fever thing across all of this. So how would we actually do this? Well, we could look at A, the pregnancy thing, find a bunch more studies on that. B, the qualitative studies asking parents about their kids with autism and how they've been responding, do more follow-up on those parents, and ask more specific questions to try to deduce when that happens during the fever, what kinds of things trigger that, and investigate all the cases where we have fever response but no improvement in the behavioral symptoms of autism in children. Does it affect adults? There's a million questions we could try to answer with our research based on the existing data, because there's a million holes there and we want to fill all of those. And so you're building off of prior conclusions. It's not often that you look at a study and go like, I completely disagree with this conclusion, but he has all this stuff right. Like, the only time I can think of that happening is like in psychology, and sometimes in nutrition, but that's more difficult to say. I want to understand the world from as many disciplines as possible. Do you have any strategies? Yeah. So A would be to look at a map of the disciplines. Oops. Like, there's a really good map here. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, I think it's this. This is a cool map if you want to start here. There's like map of science and everything. And what that does is it goes through like all of the subject. Damn, can I view that? Okay, cool. So this map of science thing is a cool place to start if that's your idea, that you want to understand the world from as many disciplines as possible. You could consider the many disciplines that you could look at things through. But I think realistically, just pick one and start learning a bunch about it. Or at least that's how it works for me. You're going to have to fit this into your life and however you want. That's a really big ask, to want to view the world from as many disciplines as possible. Like, I think I can do that, but that's mostly because my job is weird, right? Like, I write papers for graduate students. Like, of course, like, I'm going to have a lot of disciplines. Like, I've written at a doctoral level for education and psychology, sociology, and history. So like in business administration. So like, you know, there's a lot that I could talk about at like a really substantive level. But like, then if we just look at masters, there's even more majors that I've done for masters. And if we look at undergrad, I mean, like, almost everything, but like English lit people, I've done like undergrad stuff for. Like I've done a lot of undergrads and STEM people. I don't do STEM stuff, but that's because I'm awful at STEM stuff. But like I think I got that by virtue of my job. I don't know how you would do that if that's your intentional goal, to like view things from as many disciplines as possible. I don't know if that's going to be super helpful to you. I think what might be helpful in your own life is to understand the world from as many perspectives, from as many respected people as possible. So understand if you respect Destiny from Destiny's perspective, if you respect Vaush from his perspective, get why people are forming conclusions and what their big driving things are. And if you view things in those terms, you'll start seeing different patterns in people. And then if you like learn about psychology and you view things from psychology, you'll start noticing certain things about people. View it from history, you'll see different things. I think reading a book or buying a textbook or getting one for free online for anything that you're interested in, just starting to read it, and then trying to apply that into your everyday life, like using those lessons as an analogy to describe what's going on around you, is how you're going to hold on to that for a long time. So like when I'm... like right now I'm doing a bunch of COVID-19 stuff. And so everywhere I walk around, which is fairly limited because we're all on lockdown, I'm just thinking in terms of the virus and in terms of like, what are we doing? And like how this is bad and like what's going to happen and why are there old people playing golf still? And like all these other questions. But the more and more I engage with it in my head, in my day to day, whether I'm at work and just like daydreaming or whether I'm walking around and just thinking about stuff, that's how you get it to stick and you can keep going back to it. And I think that's more valuable.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you do the same thing when you make the white class reductionist, LARPy, white boy socialist who just wants to burn it all down. I feel as though you're poisoning the well in a similar way. I just think that my well poisoning in this case is more materially defensible than yours. But if it bothers...
Damn, but you are well poisoning. Okay. At least he admits it.
White boy socialist who just wants to burn it all down. I feel as though you're poisoning the well in a similar way.
Yeah.
I just think that my well poisoning in this case is more materially defensible than yours. But if it bothers you, I won't make that argument
Can you
again.
show me a single argument I've made that's like because of my class?
Well, I mean, it doesn't work that way. I couldn't show you an argument a person made because they're white either. People like Candace Owens exist.
Did he really just say that?
Work that way. I couldn't show you an argument a person made because they're white either. People like Candace Owens exist.
So for instance, when I argue with a socialist and they say things like Democrats stand for meaningless cultural changes instead of important class changes, that sounds to me like white straight privilege because
that's a bad take. That's a really bad take. Holy shit.
Things like gay marriage, things like abortion, things like what's going on at the border don't impact you. Things like DACA, you don't care about these things. So that's an example of me pointing out how, hey, it feels like your position here, your privileged position here is having a negative impact on your ability to see through these arguments.
No, yeah,
when you try
I
to
agree
throw
with that.
my net
Okay, that last part for sure, but...
worth at me.
Okay.
I never make an argument. I want to keep my wealth. I've consistently come out in favor of higher taxes. I've consistently come out saying things like, I don't think free healthcare or free schooling should be given to like my kid. It doesn't make sense. I've consistently always been against the interests of my class when it comes to things like tax policy.
Okay.
In fact, if anything, I would be more motivated to say things like everything should be a co-op because guess what? I don't actually run a business like that anyway. So like, if anything, I could go even further into saying that. Like,
So a few things there. For one, it's absolutely possible for people's arguments to be influenced by their privilege, but all of the privileged white boy arguments that you could find on Twitter, I've heard black people say as well. Your class position and your racial position and what have you can influence your perspectives, but it's not like a one-to-one determining factor.
Okay, but hold on, Vaush, because you could be a rich person that advocates for the proletariat. That's what you're doing. That's your position. Just as easily as you could be a poor person in the South that wanted to advocate for keeping slaves because you thought that one day you might strike it rich and get a slave. There are people that follow that same mentality today about different things. There are a lot of poor people that on the off chance that they might get rich or the idea that they don't want to put in laws that might hurt them one day when they're rich, argue against what would be their class interests. That's why any kind of reductionism, whether it's about class or whether it's about race or whether it's about your political leaning, is not going to be super helpful. It's not a point that you want to keep arguing about because a stereotype of any kind is not, I just don't find that that's ever a pattern of argument that's super helpful when you're trying to generalize like that. Like, especially when you hit resistance. The moment you hit resistance on a generalization, I think you should question it a little bit. Like, do I need to make this generalization? Does this really help me here? That's one thing that you should do. But I think everybody on this video obviously sees that Destiny was being crazy because we had this half and half. Oh, shit. Okay, let's keep going.
There's undeniably, you're absolutely a class progressive in some respects. I'm not saying that you're like you go on stream and you're like, ha, because I made 300,000 last year, I will now oppose this tax bill. I'm not saying that. I do think it's something that broadly influences your politics as it influences mine. Again, I didn't think this would be a huge... Again, I won't make the argument that your class position is influenced by your wealth again in the future, but I would humbly request you stop mischaracterizing everyone online who's revolutionary as like a white boy college kid. I just don't think that's accurate historically or contemporarily. And even if it was accurate, it's not an argument.
Historically, there is no Twitter usage. The Black Panthers didn't have a Facebook
Oh, boy. Here we go. Okay, but we'll keep going.
group. I don't know why I don't know if you're just throwing in words to make the argument sound
no,
more
historically, as in historically, where we can see most leftist action take place in this country, because the left has been dead for the past 20 years or longer, we can see that this is not something exclusive to college-age white people.
I never said that Bernie Sanders support or that leftism or that socialism was exclusive to that. You're mischaracterizing my argument.
Then could you please recharacterize it?
Sure, I've said it multiple times in this conversation. What I've said is that the online left on Twitter are massively overrepresented when it comes to wealth, when it comes to education, when it comes to sexuality, and when it comes to race. That's the argument that I've made. But almost every single time I've said that, in even on my stream, I usually qualify it afterwards and I say, I know that like in real life, Bernie Sanders' demographic of supporters is far different than this. But online, these are the problems that exist. Everybody acknowledges this. Even BreadTube has made threads, and other BreadTubers have talked about how overwhelmingly white, college-educated, straight, and wealthy the online YouTube commentators are. All of the big ones, Sean and Jen, H Bomber Guy, Philosophy Tube, like all of these guys are generally white, straight men. Like,
but usually for different reasons, though. Usually that conversation takes place in the context of minorities not being included in discourse, whereas in yours, you seem to just be dismissing them because they're white college-age students?
So I gave you an example of how you are dismissing my arguments without any reason.
Wait.
By giving me that word. When you just asked me, well, I've never seen how I could dismiss someone's argument just because they're white or how that relates to it. I gave you a specific example of a very particular statement that I've been given multiple times and how I think that a person's class can influence, or not class, but how they're like, I guess IDPOL can influence that. So you can't tell me, well, you're just saying it for no reason without giving me. I gave you a very particular.
Do you not think there's a relationship between people's income and their political tendencies?
There could be.
There is. Absolutely is. Didn't the wealthy vote predominantly go to Trump back in 2016? I'm pretty sure there are strong tendencies there.
Yeah, this isn't a winning argument for Destiny. I don't know why we're on this, but actually, let's review this. How did he said that bad take, and then we're kind of okay. Anyways, this isn't good for Destiny. I just want to be clear.
Hey, maybe your wealth has made you a little less willing to consider.
YouTube audience isn't very charitable for Destiny. Yeah, but they're closer to normies. You have to realize that. So like for instance, if we go to, and this might be tooting my own horn a little bit, but
it's super
not my intention. Let's see, where is it? There it is. I don't know. I don't know. Like the post under mine were pretty favorable, but I don't know if that's. Here we go. Money talk. Oh shit. Hey, thanks for the subscription not going, bro. I really appreciate it. All that money goes to updating the stream and stuff. Right now, I keep my business funds separate from the stream funds, so anything that comes in through the stream, whether that's work or subscribers, that's just going into benefiting the stream. Like this mic stand that we now have. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So the YouTube audience not being super charitable for Destiny, I don't know. I think the YouTube audience is more close to like what normie people believe, maybe. At least than Twitch. I feel like it's more indicative of that, of like the spread across like normal population than Twitch. Like there's a lot more right people, there's a lot more moderate people, there's a lot more hardcore lefty. Like I don't know, it just covers the gamut a bit more, I feel like. So as far as reaching a broader audience, Destiny doesn't really do that. He doesn't really reach a broad audience. So that's why I'm trying to help him with his rhetoric so he can appeal to more people. I think if he worked on his rhetoric more, he would appeal to more of the YouTube audience, and more of the YouTube audience would be in favor of what he's doing. Do normies favor internet socialists like Vaush? No. You can answer my question, so thank you. Yeah, okay, no problem. Yeah, I answer anybody's question, so anybody that wants to ask something, I'm pretty on top of chat. Do normies favor internet socialists like Vaush? Not from my understanding, but the way Vaush talks is very easy to connect with him and to have faith in what he's saying and stuff. He's really good at talking. He's a really good rhetorical dude. That's why I think. Sorry, that's why I think that he has to not that he has to. He would benefit from solving some of the stuff I'm pointing out. That's why I'm doing it.
Consider the more theory-based, revolutionary, populist perspectives.
Okay, then I'd say maybe your wealth has made you a little bit less willing to consider the pragmatic realities that working class people face today. And maybe you should be a little bit more willing to talk about things that actually matter, like bills passing through Congress or children dying in cages on the border, rather than just... Okay, cool.
Why do you mischaracterize?
I'm not mischaracterizing
but
you,
you
Vaush.
act as though, and you've said multiple times in this convo that I just dream of a socialist utopia.
Because when I
never
asked you
do
for
that.
policy positions related to climate change, you told me that the only way to do it is to abolish.
Okay, so he believes in a socialist utopia because every time he's asking about policy change, he doesn't. He has nothing to say. Okay, that wasn't really the framing of this whole thing up to this point. It was obviously the undercurrent, but we'll see how he responds to this.
Class.
No. I said that would be a way of helping, and I don't believe that within the...
you specific... Hold on, you're trying to rewrite the record.
A way of helping.
The only way to do it is to abolish class.
Wait.
Policy positions related to climate change, you told me that the only way to do it is to abolish class.
No. I said that would be...
Okay, so he said that his policy suggestions will require an overthrowing of the current system. That because we got to the point where we said, if we have the House for the Democrats and we flip the Senate, can your stuff pass? He said, no. And he said, okay, so your stuff requires this monumental change. Yes. So no, this is a rewrite of the record. Granted, the exact wording that Destiny is putting it in is not the exact way that it happened, but it's way closer in the characterization that Vaush has given for numerous points in this argument, which I hope by this point in the stream and in the video is apparent to you guys. I hope I'm not being crazy here, because I feel like it's very sly, but once we start pointing it out, I feel like there's an obvious pattern here, and it might just be because they're both upset at each other. Vaush might not do this normally. We'll see. I'll do more Vaush analysis, but
dream of a socialist utopia.
Because when I
never
asked you
do
for
that.
policy positions related to climate change, you told me that the only way to do it is to abolish class.
No. I said that would be a way of helping, and I don't believe that within the...
I asked you specific... Hold on, you're trying to rewrite the record live. I asked you specifically, I said, if we flipped the Senate, is there anything that Congress
okay,
could
there
do
we go. So he's going to talk about this, luckily.
to help climate change? And you said no.
No, I said I don't think there's anything they could do
Oh, being honest with you guys, I didn't finish the video, so we're going to finish it.
without anything that they could do to prevent widespread climate devastation. There are things that they could do. I'm sure some of those things would be helpful, but in terms of real substantive change, it would require them confronting their class interests, which I don't think is going to happen.
Okay, so you semantically, you said
Why is it why are you so interested in accusing me of using verbal trickery? I'm trying my best to answer your questions honestly.
Because you're essentially just restated what I said.
Do you have any idea? Okay, what do you think? Which I don't think is going to happen.
Okay, so...
devastation. There are things that they could do. I'm sure some of those things would be helpful, but in terms of real substantive change, it would require them confronting their class interests, which I don't think is going to happen.
Okay, so you semantically, you said...
Why are you so interested in accusing me of using verbal trickery? I'm trying my best to answer your questions honestly.
Because you're essentially just restated what I said.
Do you have any idea? Okay, what do you think? Do you have any idea how severe a policy would have to be for it to, at this point in time, really turn back climate change? I mean, actually do something about it. Not prevent,
but I know the vehicle through which it happens, and the vehicle through which it happens is through multilateral trade policies. There is no other reasonable discourse.
I've argued that. I've said that I disagree with the destruction of the TPP and NAFTA because it was the only way for us to economically leverage our power over countries like China, who are a huge influencer in global climate change.
Wow, cool. So it sounds like we agree on the policy points. Why would you say I have no solutions?
Because it's not a solution. It's not politically viable for us to reenact the TPP and NAFTA, is it? Not with McConnell
What do
in
you
the
think
Senate.
is more likely, getting a multilateral trade agreement passed or having...
I mean, you guys probably know what I'm going to say, so I'm just gonna let it be.
having the entire class structure of the United States
At what
change?
threshold of likeliness is it no longer relevant to talk about political solutions?
I think that if
It's a very good question. That should have been the question for the get-go.
The exact line for me, if you would. And why
But the exact line, that's tougher.
exactly do you think that you have the right
I
to tell
don't know
people?
where the exact line is, but I know that there is a massive difference between the entire class structure of the United States being reshaped versus passing multilateral trade agreements.
It's a good thing I
If
advocate
you
for
can't
both.
acknowledge that, Sure, you can advocate for both if you want, but just because you have a more fantastic and grandiose fucking vision for, 150
Yeah,
years
I have
into the Blade Runner
short-term
future,
goals and long-term
doesn't mean,
goals.
but that doesn't mean you can look to people that are looking at pragmatic policy and go, oh, well, this guy doesn't care about anything. He doesn't have any solutions proposed to these grand problems.
We had a conversation in person about this just a few days ago, and I think on the subject of climate change, you acknowledged that the free market probably wasn't going to find a solution. You threw your hands up in the air.
What kind of a pivot was that? What do multilateral trade agreements have to do with the free market?
Because
why
we
would
had
you
a
think that I would? Why
Wait,
would you think I
because
would
we had a
expect that the free
discussion,
market would solve?
And it
Oh, that's a good point. Okay, so in case you missed that, the distinction that Destiny is making is that the free market is talking about like the open exchange of goods and whatever, whereas like these trade agreements are talking about like governmentally, like we vote those into law. That's not a free market thing. That's literally government. So it's going to be separate than free market.
chatter
change.
because I mean, the TPP would be a mechanism through which the free market would allow us to leverage. Because
no, wait, hold on. This is absolutely not true. The TPP would be a way by which we can enforce government regulation, which is anti-free market, onto other countries that enact these trade agreements with us. The whole point of the TPP is to use your economy and then your government regulation and enforce other countries to follow. It's the opposite of the free market.
Yeah, but it functions through a market system, does it not? I mean, it's only through the interaction between the multinational corporations that we're able to facilitate this kind of trade leverage.
Social security payments function through a market system. That doesn't mean that all of it is free market. That's such a disingenuous way
Okay,
to state
sorry.
that.
Then
It's so
okay,
weird.
then my
a little bit, but I think we're getting a little semantic here with the free market thing. I would have moved past it at this point because it's not the crux of what we're trying to get at here, because this is on the back of this claim that like he's rewriting history in real time, which if you wanted to deal with that should have been something you're keeping track of and doing from the very beginning. Because as we pointed out, it's very difficult to keep track of that sort of stuff. And it's not the crux of what Destiny wants to argue. So he should have really stuck on the original 2 points, which is that you said I didn't have any policy and I don't want to talk about the socialist stuff.
Wait. You are really interested in painting me as acting in bad faith. Let me rephrase
Because
that.
you are, absolutely.
Not free market then. Fine.
Okay, you can say market, but there's nothing.
Look, see, now Vaush looks like the bigger man because he did it first. And he is the bigger man because he did it first. So these are moments where, like, the concession doesn't lose us a ton. It just makes us look more reasonable. Like, it really, if we want to argue over free market versus market, fine. The market. If you really want to call it the market then, whatever. Like, and he wins with that because it's like, yeah, why are we arguing over the semantics of this little bit? If I'm not interested in arguing that, the best way when somebody calls me out like that is, okay, I'll concede it. And I'll make you look silly for bringing it up. Like, because I gave it up super quickly, which means Destiny thinks that his audience or audiences in general see concession as a point of weakness or failure, because he said that on other Reddits, he had seen that people criticize people when they make their mistakes. Now, to be fair, when I check the YouTube comments, which you would expect to be the worst part of a discussion, and it was with my conversation with Destiny. When I compare the comments that I got on this video compared to the comments that I got on his Reddit, we see a really big difference. People are incredibly positive on the YouTube comments. I like how the dude low-key used some of the rhetorical methods he told Destiny about when Destiny disagreed with him about the rhetorical method, and a few times he was able to convince Destiny. Well played. The guest is the absolute best guest Destiny has ever had on. The guy streams on Twitch, blah, blah, blah. This is like watching Goku train. Video is fantastic. Will hopefully help people understand Destiny better. Like, people are generally positive. When I went on the Reddit, both of the threads about me, one of them was a meme and it was kind of negative, and then the other one was just straight up negative. Oh, there was a third one that was also negative. But all of them eventually in the comments said like they didn't finish watching the stream, or they had only seen so far into the VOD, or they like miss key parts and people are correcting them. So I don't know if we can say whatever he's saying here. I completely forgot what we're talking about.
I mean, it's only through the interaction between the multinational corporations that we're able to facilitate this kind of trade leverage.
Social security payments function through a market system. That doesn't mean that all of it is free market. That's such a disingenuous way
Okay,
to state
sorry.
that.
Then,
It's so
okay,
weasel.
then wait. You are really interested in painting me as acting in bad faith. Let me rephrase
Because
that.
you are
Not free.
And we can kill the bad faith thing by saying by giving this concession. This is incredibly well done on Vaush's part. This is what I mean by Vaush is good at rhetoric. Something like this is beautiful.
Absolutely.
Not free market then. Fine.
Okay, you can say market. There's nothing wrong with saying we need like a market.
I never said it's wrong. I said that when we were talking in person, a chatter or some donator asked about our respective beliefs on what could be done to solve climate change. You didn't seem to have a particularly strong solution. At this point, I don't think anything can really be done to stop the coming change, because even revolutionary solutions take time to implement, and they're not particularly likely to bring about. But what does bother me is that people have been put.
Why does it matter to criticize anybody for having policy solutions if you just admitted that none of the policy solutions will fix the problem to the level at which you place the bar of fixing it? Like, he's saying, to fix it, I consider you've reversed everything, or whatever arbitrary line that he's drawn in the sand. And that line in the sand, no policy, even his revolutionary policies, meets. So either we have to move that line in the sand over, like if the bar is here, or if the bar is here, and he's saying, like, your policies only go this far, and even my revolutionary ones only go this far because they take time to implement. So I don't think there's anything that will get us over that hump where I've put this line of making an impact enough to be substantial for climate change, or reversing it, or wherever he's putting that line. Again, I'm not going to draw where that line is, but I'm going to point to it, okay? If his things don't meet that bar, and Destiny's things don't meet that bar, how is that bar going to be helpful to us? We should abandon this conversation, or change the way we look at the bar, or change the framing of it, because we're not getting anywhere. If the bar is set here, and neither you nor my systems are going to pass it, right? So that's such a weird conversation to have at that point.
Pushing we just need the multilateral trade agreements, we just need the carbon taxes, what have you. This has been going on for decades now, and not only has it really failed to
But you say we just need
substantially change anything, it's misled people into believing that pithy milquetoast policy decisions can change what is essentially a climate
But that's
apocalypse.
not true. If you lived in places like LA, you've seen a dramatic curve of pollution over the past 20 or 30 years. This place used to look like Beijing. Like, there used to be smog alerts and shit in California because you couldn't.
That is true. The smog used to be really, really bad here. It's gotten a lot better. Interesting insight. I'm having some trouble following the semantics. Can you elaborate on some of your thoughts more? I don't have full context, it seems. Also, what does YouTube comments being more accepting of your talk say about normies, in your opinion, versus Reddit? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. My bad. I lost myself in the middle of it. Also, what does YouTube comments being more accepting of your talk say about the normies, in your opinion, versus Reddit? Oh, right. That somebody said something about Reddit being less favorable, right? Didn't they? Something about, okay, the YouTube audience isn't very charitable for Destiny. And I think I wanted to make a distinction that, like, normies and internet whatevers, like, it varies a lot between all of them. Maybe that's what I was getting at. I really don't know. YouTube comments being more accepting of your talk. Oh, there was also this part about this is like really, really evenly done on this. And I really think that's because Destiny didn't do a good job here. Like, I think YouTube would respond positively pretty consistently if he actually did like good arguments and stuff, because it seems like they're receptive to when he wins and stuff. Like, I've checked the videos where he does really well and they seem to be on it, and the videos where he does bad, they seem to be on it. And that's from my perspective looking at the talks. So I guess in response to his Reddit, I think the Reddit is a lot rougher on him. Oh, there was the concessions thing. Destiny thinks that when you... no, never mind. I'm just going to drop it. Let's just keep going. I just want to finish this.
The air was so fucking places.
I didn't say it didn't. Nothing. Just
also, as far as the semantics and stuff, chilling idea. If you have any questions at all, go ahead and post them. But yeah, as far as the comment thing, I completely lost it. But I want to get past this point so we can finish this.
Compared to the climate apocalypse that it is failing to prevent, I feel as though it's changed.
You know what?
Far.
It's done a hell of a lot more than any socialist country sure as fuck has in terms of producing any results relating to climate change.
What socialist countries do you want to talk about?
Well, we can talk about the USSR. We can talk about China.
The US, I don't think climate.
Okay,
I'm not defending the USSR. I don't think that climate discourse broadly was something that was that on the table when it comes to implement.
This is another thing. Destiny has this USSR argument that he brings up now because he heard it and he thinks it's really interesting, and it is. Don't bring it up with socialist people if they're educated and stuff, particularly if they watch your stuff like Vaush does. That's easy to get around. It's a very silly argument.
Back during the days of
no,
the
but
USSR.
like the extinct hunting certain animals.
Like it only works. The USSR argument works in the context. For those of you that don't know the USSR argument, he makes this argument that the USSR didn't care about like environmental policies and stuff, and they did all these shitty things that they could easily hide because of an authoritarian government, yada yada. And that works really well when people are trying to reference back to the USSR as an ideal for how they could implement climate change and other kinds of things. But it's not going to work well with Vaush because Vaush knows better. And it's a very silly point that if anybody knows anything about history and stuff or wants to take the opinion of just dismissing the USSR and not referencing it at all, they're easily going to move past it because it's a point that only works for the USSR. It doesn't really work for socialist countries in general because a lot of socialists today would not, are not harping back to that. So if nobody references back to the USSR, it doesn't do you well to bring up the USSR point. The USSR point only works when somebody tries to reference back to the USSR as a successful implement of socialism or something like that. You can't just bring it up of your own accord, or it doesn't really have the same effect as it would if Vaush would have used the USSR as an example right off the bat. And by Vaush letting him give those examples first, he's able to fish out little things like that argument, which don't make a ton of sense. Destiny has a few of these, I think, regarding like Bolivia and a few other places that I've seen hotly contested online, like with different people. And I'm not super educated on that stuff, but from what I've seen of it, it seems like they have a point. It seems like they have a good argument against Destiny. So I would avoid those arguments unless people try to use those specific countries as examples for successful iterations of socialism. Honestly, if he doesn't want to talk about socialism, if he doesn't want to talk about the ideology, he should avoid the topic altogether outside of the discussion of policy, which is something he says at the beginning of the video. And I would agree because he can't seem to handle these conversations. And to equip yourself for them, to talk about the histories and the political ideologies of all these different countries over such and such amount of time, I think is way difficult. It needs a bunch of reading that he's not willing to do, so he should just drop it. That's my opinion. If you want to argue with the socialist people about their socialist history, I would drop it because it's going to take a bunch of reading because the other people you're arguing with are also reading into it and they're coming up with their own stuff and they're biased. You're going to have to count the bias and you're going to have to go around it by finding other sources and reading them and having your own opinion on them so you can prove them wrong like you did with the striker thing. I just, if he's not willing to do all that, don't argue about it because you're going to lose. I think people have trouble understanding Destiny's approach to those conversations. That's because it's a bad approach. And I've told him this. That's why I'm being wholeheartedly honest about it because I've personally spoken with Destiny about it. And he has stated to me he knows he has a bias there. He's aware that the bias is there. It's just about him like coming to terms with that and working against it actively.
Into extinction, having massive like
Yeah, wait,
ecological
what is this?
differences.
Now this feels like a pivot to me because I don't
What?
particularly.
How is it a pivot? You're the one that just brought up.
No, I didn't. You did, and I don't care for the USSR, and also the US.
Yeah, he fucked up there. He fucked up. Let's go ahead and watch that back because I feel like there's been a lot of critiques of Vaush, and I want to give him a clip of me being super duper
USSR
positive.
broke up 30.
Like the
Like if he comes upset with me, like I promise I said good things, Vaush, but these are mostly talks to point out things that people could work on.
What
Far enough.
countries do you want to talk about?
well, we can talk about the USSR. We can talk about China.
The
we can
US.
talk about
I don't
Vietnam.
think climate. Okay, I'm not defending the USSR. I don't think that climate discourse broadly was something that was that on the table when it comes to
This whole point about like socialist countries and climate change, I think was a bad one, but
implementation back during the days of
No,
the USSR.
but like the hunting certain animals into extinction, having massive like
yeah, wait,
ecological
what is
damage
this?
to different
What,
systems.
now this feels like a pivot to me because I don't
What?
particularly.
How is it a pivot? You're the one that just brought up.
No, I didn't. You did. And
he gets him there. I liked that. When I first heard this too, I was like, I knew Destiny was fucking up when he started going down here.
and I and I don't care for the
remembering this.
USSR. And also the USSR broke up 30 years ago. Yeah, you did.
Oh, not good.
Friend, what I care
Okay,
about is bringing
What I
about
said- no,
positive
no.
change.
Wait. You made the claim that capitalism or
He got
whatever
him.
isn't addressing problems related to climate change. It is. Is it doing it fast enough? No, maybe it's not. But that doesn't mean that we can point to systems that have either dramatically failed in the past or have no like even ability to exist at this moment in time and say those will do a better
Why?
job.
That's a way more fair argument. Let's see how he responds. But that wasn't what he said before.
Wait, again, I advocate for policy decisions that can make improvements within the system, and I also advocate for broader populist changes that I think can make changes faster. I have never been of the opinion that we should just wait in our hands until the
I guess they're separate, but I don't feel like they're separate.
revolution happens and then get working. I've advocated for people to do local electioneering. I've advocated for people to push for policies like the TPP. I've advocated for all of these things. I don't understand why I just don't think they're enough. I don't think that operating within the current frame of political feasibility is anywhere near enough to address these problems and others, and that it's
Yeah, but yours don't either. And that's the part that he doesn't give as a caveat here. He should just say that there's no possible solutions right now, which could... But then it's a non-issue, right? Because then if we say that, then we drop the whole issue of climate change altogether. It's not worth discussing if we don't have any policies that'll reasonably solve it. But pointing out a failing of capitalism is the fact that it can't come up with something to solve this, when even if tomorrow we implemented a socialist solution that he's talking about that could be implemented through revolution and that wouldn't solve it, makes it a whole non-issue. Because if we're setting the bar at solving the issue of climate change, and neither will do it even if we had a revolution tomorrow, which we already know the revolution's not happening and we've agreed upon it, then it's like a non-point. It's not helpful to say. But because people aren't thinking about it like that, he can just bring it up later and say this.
I don't understand why I just don't think they're enough. I don't think that operating within the current frame of political feasibility is anywhere near enough to address these problems and others, and that it's important to have a broader, more revolutionary perspective. And if I may...
Yeah, but your revolutionary thing does not solve climate change. You just said that. Even if we do it tomorrow, which is not happening. So this point doesn't do anything. This point should not do anything, but it will do things for the audience because it can be rhetorically effective if people aren't paying a ton of attention to the logical level of the argument. That this will make a lot of sense or it'll pass through. But if we really look at this and compare it to the past points in the argument, it paints a different picture.
Hey, this is exactly the same issue, I know, that Martin Luther King Jr. had to deal with, because many of the political movements during his time were very interested in the minuscule policy proposals.
Yeah, but okay, so again, we cannot compare civil rights and the issues there to climate change. I don't think these are analogous problems, and so therefore I don't think we can look at MLK and what he did as an activist and compare it. Because MLK, if we were to tell MLK, hey, tomorrow, if we were able to start a revolt in the entirety of the United States and you could pass laws, could you solve civil rights? He'd be like, hell yes, we can solve civil rights. Like, yeah, duh. If he could fucking take over the whole country, of course he could do it, because they were fighting to do practical things. They were going to do laws. They were not practical in the sense that they were electable, but they were practical in the sense that they could be implemented and they would solve the problem. Neither of your solutions, per your own level that you've set, per your own threshold, solve the problem. So it doesn't make sense to advocate for a revolutionary ideology when it doesn't solve the problem at hand that we're talking about. That point does not follow the previous conversation, but it can feel like it because Destiny fucked up the whole last point. And so it's the only thing we come away knowing is that Vaush won the last part, but we don't know why. It was a rhetorical victory. It was a rhetorical victory because Destiny made a stupid fucking mistake and he overextended and he was upset and then he got lost. Okay. And because of that, Vaush can put this in and win that whole thing and get his point, because if Destiny continues to argue on that point, it feels like he just lost and he's like still trying to fight. How did Destiny F this up? All he needed to do was show that he does subscribe to multiple policy positions. That's what the convo is about, right? Right now, we're in a very particular part. I don't know how deep you're keeping track of all this, Barbarizer, but right now, the issue is that Destiny made the point that other socialist countries in the past, if we're talking historically, have not been able to tackle issues such as climate change in particular. And Vaush said, well, which places do you want to talk about? And one of them was the USSR. And he was like, well, the USSR was a long time ago, and I'm pretty sure they weren't caring about climate change. So, like, how are you going to use that? And then Destiny said, well, you're the one that brought up, and he's like, no, I didn't. I asked, what kind of countries do you want to talk about? And you gave the USSR, which is a bad example. And then you gave a bad example of hunting seals, which doesn't really fit with what we're talking about. And climate change didn't exist back. It's a bad example. That's what I mean by he fucked up that argument. And so the convo was about, Desi started that part of the combo topic, which is about which socialist country can we look to that's been successful at implementing climate change. But that doesn't even matter, because at the end of the day, we've said that right now, if we had a revolt, we couldn't implement anything that would fix it. So neither of them matter, because no matter what, no country today, according to what they've agreed upon, could fix this. And unless they tackle that distinction of where we draw the line for climate change, this whole thing's a non-issue. And it gets Vaush away from what, again, was the whole point of the conversation, which was to A, say that Destiny had no policy solutions, and B, Destiny's question about this dude not having any policy things for climate change that are viable at all, or that could solve it, right? Because his bar of solving it, he admitted that none of his revolutionary policies would solve it. So like, this whole thing's a mess. It's just a mess. But Vaush is going to win it because Vaush talks a lot better. And Destiny overstepped a bunch of times here, and he kept fucking up. So yeah, Vaush is the very clear winner here, but that's because Destiny fucked up a bunch. Yeah.
Proposals about.
I wanted to pick a conversation where Vaush does really, really well to criticize Vaush, because then at the end of the day, I can just say, you won that one. I know you won it. And I say multiple times you won it because you did. He won it. The point of this is not who wins or loses or whatever. The point of this is giving you advice so that the next time you could do even better, or you're more likely to convince more people or accomplish whatever your goal is. If you want to tell me what your goal is, we can talk about how your rhetoric gets you there. That's what I'm here to do. That's all I'm here to do. That's all we're going to talk about. But as far as the politics and stuff, we will go down arguments that are related to it. That's what we've done this entire talk. I hope that this talk can be an example for Vaush on how we do stuff here.
Maybe alleviating this or that aspect of the Jim Crow laws, or seeing an appropriation of wealth from here to here in very minor ways. But they rejected this, not wholesale, but said it wasn't enough. And they pushed as a populist movement for something more. And that is what I advocate for. Simultaneously to work within the system, but to advocate for something better. I think this is an inarguable position.
Yeah, sure. The position sounds fine, but it's a far cry from saying that I have no solutions proposed for any of this, which is just demonstrably false.
Fine. No sufficient.
I'm happy that he keeps bringing it back to this point, because this was the point the entire argument.
Solutions. A solution usually solves a problem.
In order for them to be sufficient, for them to be some fantastical restructuring of our entire society, that is correct. I don't have any of those solutions at this point in time, because I usually don't waste my time fantasizing about them.
Well, a fantastical restructuring of our society was precisely what allowed us to solve many political problems back during the 18th century.
And this is stuff he already has ready to say, and you can tell by the tone of his voice, whatever.
I don't see why it's impossible.
Are you planning on working with Vaush in the future? I mean, maybe. He doesn't seem to like me very much. I reached out to him on Twitter. If he reaches out, yeah, I'm happy to help him with whatever. Yeah.
Possible for us to believe this could at least be on the table in the future.
Like if he wants help with stuff, but I think he has to realize that these aren't debates that I engage in, that these are like discussions about like how you're having conversations and stuff and how you're communicating. They're not really like debates. As long as he's down for something that's not a debate, I'd be happy to talk to him.
Sure.
Okay, well, I'll talk to you again in 25 years when we're still nowhere closer to socialism than we were 70 years ago when people thought that we were on the cusp of being there.
Wait,
so.
for one, you do realize that's not a response to what I said, and for two, you do realize I don't believe I'm going to see a socialist revolution in my lifetime. I said this to you in person.
You do realize that you've said this a million times to me, that's saying like, well, we went from feudalism to capitalism, so therefore anything else we could move to. That's not an argument either, right? You have to actually like do the groundwork and demonstrate it succeeding. Capitalism and markets existed across many different types of feudal lands, whether it was farmers trading crops with each other, whether it was armors with. There were tons of these different.
There have been socialist governments for centuries.
No, they're not, that have worked successfully on any scale.
Wait,
no,
but those capitalist societies also invariably got crushed. There were a few successful experiments. I haven't read up on all of it, but
the difference was that market economies were tenacious enough that they survived through anybody trying to crush them or through any other.
No, they didn't. They survived.
They
survived when people who wanted the principles of the Enlightenment to dictate their government policy eventually grew powerful enough that they could overthrow the benefactors of the previous system. That's how power spreads, not through ideas succeeding in spite of adversity, but through power and people who are willing to kill to preserve them. And that's what.
You don't think the royalty or the bourgeois or the previous upper class wasn't?
So I know that in the past we've criticized Vaush's like tendency to like talk like he's like giving a speech or something, and that it can be cringy and whatever and off-putting for people. I think in this particular instance, it works really well for him in a way that it didn't at the very beginning of the conversation. I think once you're at the end, that's when using that kind of speechy talk really works, because you've built your whole case. So like some practical information to give you guys about papers. When I write a paper, generally I write the whole body first, because I want to know what my arguments are, the way that flows, and like what is kind of like the feel through the whole paper. Like where do we kind of end up? Because like I feel like the crux of my argument sometimes can be at the beginning, and then we kind of curve it off to the end with examples, or it can be slow in the beginning, a lot of theory, and then it can be my thing at the end, and then we can crescendo into a conclusion, or sometimes it's in the middle. And we have like a little loop in the middle, and then we have our conclusion. But in any case, usually the speechy type of language works when you've already got people on your team. So if we've already like explained all of our stuff, and we have this slow build up towards the end, being speechy in our conclusion can totally like convince people. And it works really, really well because at that point people are already on our team. But being speechy at the very beginning comes off as preachy and undeserved or weird. And so you shouldn't do it. But if you do the speechy thing, it really works at the end. Let's go ahead and listen to that one more time. I want to give this to Vaush. As in, like, I want to like say that he did well here.
Successful experiments. I haven't read up on all of it, but
The difference was that market economies were tenacious enough that they survived through anybody trying to crush them or through any other
no, they
opposition,
didn't.
and
They
now it is the
survived. They survived when people who wanted the principles of the Enlightenment to dictate their government policy eventually grew powerful enough that they could overthrow the benefactors of the previous system. That's how power spreads, not through
And this works too because he doesn't use any socialist terminology in it. Do you notice that?
ideas succeeding in spite of adversity, but through power and people who are willing to kill to preserve them. And that's
And
what
you don't think the
All of that. Aside from benefactor, we don't have any super big language in there. Let's go ahead and listen one more time.
anybody trying to crush them or through any other
No, they
opposition,
didn't.
and
They
now it is the
survived. They survived when people who wanted the principles of the Enlightenment to dictate their government policy eventually grew powerful enough that they could overthrow the benefactors of the previous system. That's how power spreads, not through
And that's how he should have worded this very initial thing. And this is why I made this such a big point at the very beginning. Because if we go down to wherever that was, this. Saying the purple, which for anybody who's just joining us late, the purple is every reference that he's making or speech that's charged from the revolutionary or socialist lens. So he says, yes, but however, large, broad-spanning policies that overall serve the disinterest of the working class that benefited the ruling class would be broken apart by a dissolution of the class divide between bourgeoisie and proletariat. Quite a wordy sentence, and part of what makes it wordy is it's all socialist rhetoric. So, what's my advice? Don't do the socialist rhetoric. Find something else. Find something that resonates with people, whether that's the populist rhetoric of Bernie Sanders, who manages to explain these proletariat class issues, whatever, very well to people, or whether that's finding your own unique way of doing it. But I think dropping some of the words like bourgeoisie and proletariat when you're talking to somebody like Destiny, who's already actively against those things, is probably for the best. It's probably best not to frame things from a classist perspective for somebody who will not engage with that at all. Because at this point, seeming like Destiny's not going to engage with that stuff. If he would have reworded this in the simple language that he uses at the very end of this video, this could have been way more effective right at the beginning of the conversation. And it could have explained his point a lot better without the socialist language that ultimately made this incomprehensible to Destiny. He will not accept it because it's wrapped up in the socialist stuff. Part of the advice that I give people on arguments, whether that's online or even with people at your own house or in your own life, is to wrap up the advice that you give somebody or the criticisms that you have for them, wrap that up in their own words. So, and this should happen with anything. Anything you want to explain or communicate to somebody, you should wrap up in the terminology and words they understand and use. An example of this that's practical. When somebody calls me, I have call notes. And what do I write on those call notes? Well, one of the biggest things that I write are words that I feel that person finds important. Words that I feel describes their situation or need, because this is in a business sense. I am a business person. I'm trying to provide this person a service that solves a problem that they have. So the example that I gave last time, and I'll give again because now I can disclose a bunch of stuff about this client. It was a lady that called me. Her son is unable to read, and he's 8 years old. Okay, school starts when you're like 5 or 6. So that kid is way behind, and he's never been in school up to this point. He can't read or write. That's a big problem. So when she's describing this to me, she's using words like terrified, scared, uncertain, words like this, where it's like the future for her. She doesn't know what it is. Nobody else is in a situation like her with a kid that can't read or write at the age of 8. He hasn't been in school. He's not been in the system. If he goes there, he hasn't been socialized either. How is he going to interact with other children? What's going to happen when not only is he the social outsider, but he's the academic one as well? What happens when he can't rely on something like school success or anything to feel good about? And obviously the things at home are not going well. And that's why he hasn't been in school too. So this kid doesn't have anywhere. And if she sends him to school every day, and it's even shittier for him than it is at home because he can't fucking keep up and people are bullying him. He doesn't know how to act and he's scared. It's his very first time. He knows he's weird. He's got this background he can't talk about. All these things. This makes it for a very uncertain and scary situation for her. And she needs to be reassured that systems are in place to help her son. And so that's what I do. That's what I did. I looked at the words she gave me and I built my thing around that. So I go, I know that right now you're scared. I know that the future is really uncertain. So what I'm going to do to help you is we're going to create plans and systems that are going to outline the next few months. And eventually, hopefully by the end of this month, we will have a whole plan outlined from start to finish to get him into school. And that way the future will not be uncertain for you. We will have a plan for moving forward. And keeping you guys on the track of that plan will be my job. So as long as you meet your end and bring him when he needs to be brought and keep him on top of his work, we'll make this happen. So don't worry about it. All I need for you to do is to have faith in the system and to be consistent on top of what we plan for, because we'll be on the same page through this entire process. There will not be a single thing that's done with your child that you won't understand. There will not be a single assignment that I send home that you won't be aware of. There won't be a single step of this process that won't be made clear to you. And to be someone that was reassuring, to be someone who told her about my past experience with this and like what my plan was for a curriculum and what we were going to do, and how because not many other tutors prepare lesson plans, she's very lucky that she reached out to me, and that not a lot of other tutors do all the weird stuff in private that I do, like all the essays and stuff. Maybe I'm in a unique position to help this kid. And I felt that way. And so that's what I communicated to her. And so if you're going to be giving something to somebody, it's always best to wrap it up in their own words. If you put it all in this, it's like if Destiny really doesn't like the texture of a food, and you keep cooking with that texture, and then he spits it up and won't eat it, and you're confused. He doesn't fucking like my cooking. He's an ungrateful piece of shit and whatever. You can make all these crazy reasons as to why he's not eating the food, but the reason he won't eat the food is because it's not tasty. You got to start from square one. Make the food fucking edible to him. It's going to be edible if it's wrapped up in his own words. The idea is going to be processed a lot better if he can understand it, if he can cope with it, if he can get it down. If it's wrapped up in his own terminology, it's much easier for him to process and understand, as well as internalize. It's a lot easier to slot it into an existing feeling that you have when it's wrapped up in words that you use and you use to frame the world and understand it. And so that's some general advice. That's the biggest thing that Vaush could fix, is by kind of rethinking some of the ways that he words stuff and some of his I would say that. Okay, let's just finish this video. It's been so long. Holy crap.
Ideas succeeding in spite of adversity, but through power and people who are willing to kill to preserve them.
This is very
and that's
And you don't think the royalty or the bourgeois or the previous upper class wasn't willing to defend their systems as well?
They did, and they eventually lost.
It's a better form of organizing an economy.
Then feudalism. Wait. No, and because people who believed in it eventually succeeded in their beheadings and got ahead and took hold of the governments they needed to take hold of.
And socialists have tried as much in the past, and they failed over and over and over again. So it seems like it's probably not a really good way of organizing an economy that can't hold its own on the world market.
What specific policies economically do you think I propose that would be unsustainable in a future economy? Or are you just literally doing the Vuvuzela argument? You're literally doing the what about Venezuela argument.
No, I'm not. Every policy position that you've given...
I'm going to pause. I don't know what that is, so I have to skip past it.
I'm pretty confident you've copy-pasted them from my own previous YouTube videos. So obviously, I agree with all of your individual policy prescriptions.
That's a funny way of avoiding... Wait, that's a funny way of acknowledging the fact that we agree on more than you're willing to admit.
No, you're the one that wouldn't admit that. I would never come out and say, oh, Vaush, he doesn't have solutions to anything. You said that about me.
I don't understand why you're so fixated.
Yes. Every single policy
No, because policy isn't the end of politics. Political theory encompasses everything, not just policy.
Yeah, but he's not concerned with that part. He's concerned that you said he had no policy things.
See, policy, what's electable, what's viable, is an incredibly tiny fragment.
But electable and viable and policy are two different things. One is an adjective to describe the other, I feel like. Anti-socialists reference Venezuela. Oh, okay.
Of the broader political happenings in a country. To end at policy and to not address political theory, I'm sorry if it's boring for you, and if you're not interested in it, then fine.
You keep saying that I don't want to talk about political
You've said you don't want to talk about it.
Requires so much.
Wait, you've said, am I mischaracterizing you?
So much of what you say is just trying to score brownie points.
Wait, dude, you're the one who...
I think it's just the look at Venezuela. Oh, just look at Venezuela thing. Okay. I honestly don't know what that is. I'm sorry. I guess Venezuela is a country that wasn't doing well, and that's why we point to it as an example of socialism, because it's sucking ass. Is that why?
You're the one who keeps accusing me.
I honestly don't think the references to other socialist countries are super helpful at all. But I mean, that's because I anchor or whatever. When I talk about socialist stuff, like personally, like as an actual political thing or like as the ideas of it, I feel like it's a lot easier to talk about like how I use it is in the way that I run my business. So like the way I pay people and stuff is very much so considerate of them. And I take a few socialist ideas and like making decisions for my company. But I think that it's way better to just start with the ideas that socialism gives us and use those simple core principles to solve problems. So starting with a very simple, nobody can argue against it, just principle to direct the way that you make decisions, and then applying that broad principle to a multitude of very specific problems and applying it at every level of decision making from the top down is probably the best way to start seeing how that's going to beat capitalism or how that's going to have reasonable change. Because I do think it is a more appealing system when explained to people. Like it's more, it feels a lot better. Like the principles seem more aligned with what we feel like the government should do. But that's because I think more and more we're okay with the government providing services to us and guaranteeing certain things. And I view the government as a thing to like, I don't know, it could just guarantee us a bunch of stuff. And it's like a giant company. Like I liked Andrew Yang comparing it to like we're all shareholders in a company. I feel like that's a really good way of framing stuff if you want to. Again, a lot of people with socialist kind of ideas that you could just like take and use to improve your rhetoric a little bit. Because just this class stuff is not super whatever. I mean, if you're talking to other lefty people, I'm sure it works super well. Like in conservative me, Charlie Kirk. Okay, let's finish this.
You're acting in bad faith.
I have never said that we should never. I literally spent how much of my time talking about.
You pretended to fall asleep earlier when I just talked about a solution I had. You talked in the stream I was looking at about how you don't like talking about.
That Nightbot chat thing is just to let me know every single hour that goes by. It's like not even meant for you guys, to be honest. Just in case you're wondering why that keeps coming up.
My initial contention with you was you said that I have no proposed solutions.
No sufficient proposed solutions. Yeah, sufficient. My
You said
apologies.
no proposed solutions to these problems.
Well, okay, in my mind, a solution fixes a problem. So a sufficient solution would be one that
That has nothing to
fixes.
do with whether or not I think you could talk about political theory or not.
And why-
If you wanna talk
wait,
about
wait.
political theory? That's fine.
Then
But
why do you
can't
keep
talk about
insulting
it if-
people for talking about political theory?
I'm not. I'm insulting you.
I just
for talking
watched
about-
your stream segment. You were saying people who talk about it are brain-dead ideologues who only care about the revolution, and you're bored of political theory, and you only care about policy, and you pretended to snore earlier when I gave you a potential solution.
What I'm saying is that if you want to talk about political theory and then lambast everybody else that wants to talk about policy by saying, well, they're not proposing enough, that is a ridiculous dichotomy.
Anybody who cares only about policy or only about political theory is, as far as I'm concerned, a demagogue who doesn't actually care about affecting change. And I've said the same
and I
damn
talked
thing.
about both.
I've said the same thing about all of the fucking dipshit tankies out there who do believe everything that you mischaracterize socialists as. These class reductionist fuckheads who don't care about electoralism and only want to sit on their asses until mommy and their chicken tendies will eventually carry them through to the revolution. I think both are important. You stick mostly to policy, important, good, great. But when you say stuff like political theory is dumb, political theory is larpy, political theory is boring, it does make me think as though you're leaving a lot of potential solutions on the table. And that does bother me.
When you're literally coming out and saying, oh, he has no proposals, because I usually ground most of my policy positions in pragmatic electoral reality, that's
No,
bullshit.
you have proposals, just not solutions.
Okay, well,
I mean, they
like
address
the
the-
socialist revolt or whatever. I guess I
It
don't
won't
know.
happen in my lifetime. I've said that
We
multiple
both know
times.
that. I don't-
Proposals versus solutions. Come on, bruh. You certainly weren't framing that as if you both didn't have solutions. I feel like he came to this conclusion through this conversation. It was not at all the intention of the initial thing that he said, but that's my opinion. Looks like we have a message. Let me check that off screen. Both got to me. I'll accept that and then we'll talk in a sec, Rick. Okay, what are we gonna do, guys? I think we're done with this video, right? Oh, let's see. Nearly done.
No. Fucking Christ, I'm hosting Raj. Jesus, fuck, I fucking hate.
Oh, buddy, you can't get so upset. Or just don't engage with them. You don't have to. Well, yeah, I know how you are. You probably will. No matter what. But you just take some solace in knowing you probably don't have to. It feels like Vaush has more to gain by being antagonistic. 100% he does. He has way more to gain by being antagonistic towards Destiny. That's why I don't know if these conversations are necessarily the best for him to have. If they're not revolving around attacking the revolutionary thing and ignoring the rest of it, I don't think that's productive for Destiny. That's why I made it I made a point to bring up the revolutionary thing to him in the brief conversation that we had after his striker debate, just because my biggest piece of advice that I could give Destiny about talking to Vaush would be to do that. And then the other one is just to not get emotional and not to overstep. Just be careful, because Vaush is careful too, and he's very rhetorically strong. And so you have to be careful, because, and I worded this on Twitter as dangerous, but apparently that's not good. Oh, thanks. Yuto ReZero. Yuto. Is that a character from ReZero? Yuto. I wonder. Sorry, I'm a weeb. Who is Yuto? Nope, that ain't nobody. Okay, it's just random. Okay, but thank you, Yuto. It's really nice. So this is all done. Cool. If you guys aren't following me on Twitter, follow me on Twitter. There are panels down below with everything. So if you guys just want to join the Discord, we have people that talk. I'm open to questions all the time. I work most of the day, but I'm really bad at work. So I will be on Discord all the time, and I answer people all the time. Weebs rise up. Damn straight, Dre. I understand why Destiny is frustrated, but it is a bad look. Yeah, it is. Take it from the Rhetoric guy. Yeah, that's what I'm focused on is the look. Yeah, it's not good. His logic's all right, but his looks are not good. Even in that conversation, his logic drifted a bit on certain points, but that's because he gets upset. It's an emotional thing, and it happens to all of us. When you're frustrated, when you're upset, when you dislike somebody, it's going to come in, and you have to tackle it in some way. Like, my way of tackling it is mostly to constantly give caveats about the other things I believe that should counter that. So like with Vaush, I constantly want to mention how good he is at this, because I understand that my criticisms can start to dip to the point where you guys understand that, like, I don't like some of the ways that he approaches conversation or some of the rhetorical devices he implements. And that I don't think it's necessarily worth mentioning either, because it does good stuff for him. That's why I'm not bringing a ton of stuff up. It's just these few things that I think you could change, because other people are going to pick up on them and they're going to fucking show your power level or whatever. If somebody could explain the power level meme to me, hiding your power level, I would really appreciate that, because I don't understand that, and everybody says it all the time. Like, sometimes I'll give people advice, and they're like, you can't do that, because if the other person hides their power level, that's going to be ineffective. I don't know what power level means, so I guess I'm a bit lost. I know it's like a Dragon Ball thing, isn't it? But if you hide your power level, it's like hiding the way you actually feel. Oh, okay. I thought it was like hiding your ability in conversation or something. Like you're hiding how good you are at argument, or like how many arguments you have under your sleeve, or like how educated you are in a topic. I thought that's what hiding your power level was. Hiding someone's power level means to disguise how extreme they are, usually to the... Oh, never mind. I should stop using that. I'm sorry. You're not hiding your power level, Vaush. I didn't know that that's what that meant. Maybe you have very radical extreme views but don't express that. Oh, okay. Maybe you are hiding your power level, actually, if that's what it means. Seems like a word that it's like concerned trolling. Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, I guess I had a bad read on it. I really thought it had to do with your ability and stuff. Okay. Well, we're all done with that. So let's see what else we have to work on. Oh, Destiny and I are going to have a debate on public and private language. And it's actually going to be a debate. It won't be a rhetorical discussion. This will actually be like, I disagree with you on this, and I would like you to change your position. So you guys might be interested in that, because it's probably one of the only ones of those that I'm going to do. Just because I think I would like him not to say the N-word. I was talking to my coworkers about that, and they thought that was fucking hilarious. They're like, wait, hold on. What is this Destiny public-private language thing on our Notion? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to debate this guy about saying the N-word in private. And they were like... and they love that. Holy shit. Do we want to go through this or no? Looked like there was a bug. I don't think we want to go through the striker debate. I think that was just like not great. Okay, let's see. Tuesday talk. What you need to do. Okay, we did that. Vaush, we did that. Oh, let's look at the Vaush tweets now that we have all that context. Because I don't feel like he worded my thing super well. What's your position on private use of slurs? It depends on what they are, I guess, and what you're doing. I don't have any hard stances on it. I just think the N-word in particular is one you probably shouldn't say if you're Destiny. That's all. And you probably shouldn't say the N-word at all, to be honest. I need to go to Bosch. Actually, to go to notifications. Go to here. Click this. View the thread. Okay. So I said, did you end up getting more context for the conversation he and I had afterwards? I worry the clip caused some issues, whatever, but felt that it was pretty tame and sensible. Aren't you the rhetoric guy that said the fact that I'm a good rhetorician makes me dangerous? Yep. Yeah, that kind of felt like a condemnation. I said, quote unquote, condemnation seems a bit deep. I really think that in the context of rhetoric and opponents in debate, you are dangerous. Anyone conscious of their rhetoric and careful in that regard would be, myself included. Not meant to be a dig. For added context, I specifically help people with advice on debate and argumentative approaches. I don't focus too much on the political particulars so much as the argumentative effectiveness and stuff. Only mention politics really as they pertain to the argument advice. He said, well, there's definitely a value judgment in saying my rhetoric is dangerous. See, I didn't say his rhetoric is dangerous. This is why I don't like Vaush, is because sometimes he says shit that's like not true. I didn't say his rhetoric is dangerous. He said he's dangerous because he's good at rhetoric. Those are two different things. Because if I said his rhetoric is dangerous, that's me like openly refuting what he's doing and saying that it's actively like working against a bunch of people and dangerous. That's very different than saying that like you're dangerous because your rhetoric is good. Like your rhetoric isn't like dangerous in and of itself. It's just like you are dangerous when you are able to use your rhetoric effectively in an argument. Yeah, you're a dangerous person to whoever I'm giving advice to. You are a significant opponent for that person because you are rhetorically effective. So yes, from my perspective, you are dangerous to that person. Happy to explain more in private because Twitter sort of sucks for communicating this. I don't think I said your rhetoric is dangerous. That'd be a value statement for sure. I'm saying rhetorical prowess is dangerous to your opposition in an argument, so I noted it for Destiny. Yeah, it's more so that it's dangerous to your opposition in the argument. So that's what I tried to do with that. I tried to give him some thing here with that'd be a value statement for sure because he says that's a value judgment. Yeah. Anywho, dangerous can mean you're likely to cause problems for your opponents and enemies. It could if you want to be uncharitable to my position, but if I told you that's not what I mean and you have no other reason to believe that it's not what I mean, it is kind of uncharitable to continue to take that interpretation of it, in my opinion. But yeah, needless to say, I won't be using the dangerous thing too much because it upsets him. That's fine. I won't use it. Or I'll try not to. But no, I think it's more uncharitable to do that. When is the debate?